everyone. I'm really excited to say this, so let's get a little cheer afterwards. Welcome to Outvertising Live 2022. Woo! So I'm Lucy McKillop, she, her.
And I'm Mark Runnicus, he, him. By the way, you look spectacular.
I thought I'd play it safe.
And I'm being the straight man today, obviously.
So we want this afternoon to set the agenda for LGBTQ plus inclusion in advertising and marketing, because that's what advertising is all about. Our purpose is to ensure that the UK marketing and advertising industry is completely LGBTQ, easy for some to say, LGBTQ plus inclusive, internally by ensuring we all work in a welcoming, creative environment, and externally by ensuring that our advertising output is as inclusive as it can be.
And I don't want to be too ambitious, but we hope this is the first of what we hope will be an annual event for us. In fact, we've called it Adland's Annual Queer Gathering. So welcome to Adland's Annual Queer Gathering.
Yes! Woo, woo, woo!
A little bit about us. If you're not close to us, then let me tell you that we're all volunteers. We don't do this for a living. We've all got very ordinary jobs in advertising and marketing. And as a result, the whole day today has been put together by an amazing gang of volunteers. Thank you, gang.
Yes.
What a great job. Thank you.
It's quite incredible what has been done by this wonderful group of volunteers that joins advertising.
I don't want to spend too long on the agenda. Let's get to the content. That's the thing that you want to see. Several fascinating panels coming up for you this afternoon. I can see some of the bright-eyed panelists already on the front row. I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say. And we're going to have a sneak peek of a fascinating coming up consumer report, which is focused on queer brand preference and media consumption. We think it's a world first, but I'll let the team tell us more about it. That's going to be released in spring 2023.
So we are also thrilled to have a couple of superstar headline speakers to bookend the afternoon. Firstly, we welcome Stonewall CEO Nancy Kelly, who you'll hear from shortly. Hi, Nancy. And the CEO of Publicis Group UK, Annette King, who will be rounding off the afternoon before we get stuck into some networking drinks, courtesy of our friends at Diageo. Speaking of which, today wouldn't be possible without the support of our fantastic partners. So I would like us all to take a moment to thank Meta for donating space and catering and all of this amazing tech. It has blown my mind how smoothly this has all gone. Diageo for the amazing drinks later, and Clear Channel and Pink News, who are helping us put on the after party, which I hope to see you all at. So thank you to everyone. Big clap.
And if you thought that was enough, there's more. Because after this afternoon, if you want to come and join us to let your hair down, might be a problem for me. But anyway, we have something called Outvertising Live Late, our after party taking place at the Zodiac Bar from 7 o'clock tonight. We'll remind you where and when it is later. So hopefully we'll see you at the bar later.
Great. So just a little sneak peek of the lineup. We've got Lucia Blake, Miss Sharon Legrand, and Josh Quinton on the decks, and a drag show. It's going to be fabulous, obviously. So, what next?
Well, before we get started, there's lots of opportunities for you to ask questions. Please don't hold back. This is a safe space this afternoon. So you can see on screen that you can take part using the hashtag Outvertising Live. There's more handles on there. And if you want to look back at the agenda, then you can go online and look. It's outvertising.org/Outvertising Live. Okay. We're done. Let's get to some of the content.
Yes.
Let's get started.
Yes, let's get started. So I think I've done enough intro about Nancy already, so I'm going to welcome her to the stage. Please welcome Nancy Kelly.
Hello, everyone. I don't know if you could see me gesturing like a toddler for the clicky thing, but I'm in control. Let's see if it works. Oh, there we go. It's lovely to see you all. Thanks for inviting me. I am very excited. I'm also getting older, so I'm going to use glasses for this bit. So, at Stonewall, we stand for all LGBTQ plus people, and we can imagine a world where LGBTQ plus people everywhere can live our lives and are free to be ourselves. As many of you know, we were founded in 1989, and we were founded to fight back against Section 28 of the Local Government Act. But today, we work across all 4 nations of the UK, and we work with LGBTQ rights activists in countries all around the world to try and create that world where we all get to be free. We know it's a big ask. It's a bold vision, right? The road to realizing that world is probably going to be quite long, but we also know that as part of a global movement that is fighting for freedom, for equity, and for the potential of all LGBTQ plus communities, we know we're going to get there, and we are going to get there together. I'm going to focus today, though, on telling a story about LGBTQ plus people in the UK. But this story has resonances and echoes around the world in different places and different times. I'm going to talk about the road we've travelled over the last 50 years, about where we are right now, and about where we need to get to, what that road ahead looks like. And I'm hoping that I'll give you a bit of food for thought about how brands can drive progress, how brands can be part of taking us to that world that we imagine, or at least how brands can avoid driving us away from that world. And I'm going to start by coming out. So, hi, I'm Nancy. I'm a lesbian. Coming out is something that many of us do every day. I know I do it every day. And sometimes in obvious ways, sometimes in ways that we choose and we control. Other times in ways that we can't really control. So I'm like the outest person in the history of Outland. But even I was super, super surprised when I became a mum, because you suddenly lose control of who you're out to, when you come out, what's going on, because there is just nothing you can do when you've got an 8-year-old that is yelling at you on the bus, "Mummy, is Mama picking us up from school later?" and everyone turns round. So I'm going to talk a bit about coming out, and I'm going to share one of my favourite quotes. So this is a quote from Harvey Milk. He was the first openly queer person to be elected in the state of California. This was actually a quote from the year in which he was killed. "Gay brothers and sisters, you must come out. Come out to your parents. I know it's hard and will hurt them, but think about how they'll hurt you in the voting booth. Come out to your relatives. Come out to your friends, if indeed they are your friends. Come out to your neighbours, to your fellow workers, to the people who work where you eat and shop. Come out only to the people you know and who know you, not to anyone else. But once and for all, break down the myths. Destroy the lies and distortions for your sake, for their sake." So Harvey said that in 1978. Coming out, demanding that we be seen and being seen, is at the heart of the fight for LGBTQ plus liberation. I love this picture. This is the first Pride March in London. So 50 years ago, the Gay Liberation Front led the first Pride March through central London, demanding that our community be seen by wider society. I love all of these. I love "homosexuals are revolting" has always been one of my favorite signs. So much work being done there. There were about 2,000 people marching on this day. And I don't know if you can see, but there are an absolute ton of police. I had the pleasure of marching on the 50th anniversary with GLF veterans, and they said actually in some places there were more police than there were marchers, and you can see that reality there. These people were being kind of shielded, protected protecting the right-thinking general public from having to see any of these disgusting LGBTQ plus people. So this year, over 1 million people marched through the centre of London. Let me see if I can show you. There we go. There's the enormous Pride March. And with each year that goes by, more and more of us feel able to come out and live our lives openly. Each generation is more likely to identify as LGBTQ+ than the generation before. They're more likely to feel comfortable being visible, demanding that they are seen. And as time passes, even our elders feel more comfortable living their truth. So we can see this really clearly in population data. Don't panic, I'm going to show you some statistics. Okay, this is a really complicated graph. Don't worry, I'm going to tell you what it tells you. This is from the annual population survey by ONS. At the minute, we don't have great data in the UK on trans people. So this is about the lesbian, gay, and bi population by age and by sex. And what you can see, this is from 2019, the data was collected, is that, unsurprisingly, young people are the most likely group to identify as lesbian, gay, or bisexual. It's about 6.6% of the population identified as lesbian, gay, or bisexual in 2019. I would expect that number to be much higher now. It goes up quite rapidly these days. The youngest group is more likely to identify as bi or pan than lesbian or gay. That's different from these older cohorts. So people in my age range, I'm not going to tell you which it is, because obviously I look very youthful, but it's not 16 to 24, I'll give you a clue. People like me are more likely to identify as lesbian and gay, but this younger cohort there are still more lesbians than there have ever been, there are more gay men than there have ever been, but there are a ton of bi and pan people in those younger cohorts. And what that means, and what this is telling you, this big bar at the bottom actually, is that we're a super young community. About a third of the whole LGBTQ plus community in population terms are under the age of 25. It's kind of mind-blowing, really. But when you look beyond the label and you ask not what kind of identity category do you use, but who are you attracted to, those numbers start to explode. So this is from a report we wrote called Rainbow Britain. I would really suggest you look at it. Super, super interesting. And this is data that shows us what happens when you ask people, who are you attracted to? You don't ask them to kind of nail their colours to the mast with a label. You just ask them, who do you feel drawn to? Who do you find sexually attractive? So to give you a sense of comparison, when you say, are you straight or are you lesbian, gay or bi? Around 84% of the population say I'm straight. But look at this. Only 66% of the population are exclusively attracted to people of the opposite sex. So there's almost a 20% difference. When you just let people tell you how they feel, these numbers start to look really different. And you can see here that you have kind of increasingly large percentages in all of the other categories. So this is lesbians and gays over here. There we go. 8% of the population don't say they're lesbian and gay, but 8% of the population are only attracted to people like them. So really, really kind of important, interesting data to think about in terms of where we're going as a society. Okay, this is a really ugly graph. Sorry. It turns out Statistics Canada is great at statistics and absolutely cack at drawing graphs. So there is no good data on the trans community in the UK, and there's actually only one country at the minute that's got proper census data on trans people. It's Canada, usefully. So I just thought I'd show you this, because what you can see is pretty much the same thing. So we have a dark blue line that's trans men, we have a pale blue line that's trans women, red line is non-binary people, and the grey is the kind of total of these groups. And look at that. In broad terms, Generation by generation, more and more trans people are coming out. Just like generation by generation, more and more cis people are coming out as lesbian, gay, bi, or queer in different ways. And I just sort of point to the fact that we shouldn't worry about that. There's a lot of moral panic about, oh my goodness, there's like loads of trans people all of a sudden. It's just a bit safer to come out as trans. Trans people are just a bit more visible, just like it's a bit safer to come out as lesbian, gay, or bi. Do you recognise this lady? I did my own face paint. It's me, my wife, and our pug, and our friends about to march with 1 million people. So generations after Harvey Milk, year after year, more and more of us are coming out. Our communities are more visible, they're more vocal than they ever were. LGBTQ plus people becoming part of popular culture, becoming visible on films and in TV, on the stage, in music, in the arts, in politics, and in advertising of major brands has been a huge part of this story. As we grow up, we seek to understand ourselves. We look around. We look for role models. And popular culture, including advertising, makes those role models visible. If we can see it, we can be it. And if popular culture represents LGBTQ plus people, not as dangerous militants, but as part of families and communities, then we will increasingly find a welcome wherever we go. We can hope for that world where we can be free and can thrive. So, over the last 50 years, we've seen incredible progress in the UK on LGBTQ plus civil rights. So remember, homosexuality was criminal here until 1967. Now we have an equal age of consent. We have pardons for LGBTQ plus veterans. We have equal marriage. We have protections for LGBTQ plus families in law. And thanks very recently to Stonewall's IVF for All campaign, this year the government has committed to equalising access to IVF for lesbians, bi women and trans people that need it. We've lived through the pain of the HIV epidemic, along with a punishing homophobic moral panic. And we're now on track for 0 new transmissions of HIV by 2030. If you're old enough to remember the 80s and early 90s, that is unbelievable progress. We've gone from Section 28, which made it impossible for teachers, for youth workers, to even mention LGBTQ plus people, to a situation in which inclusive relationships and sex education is a statutory requirement in all nations of the UK, with the exception of Northern Ireland. We're even about to pass reform of the Gender Recognition Act in Scotland, thanks to my great friends at Stonewall Scotland, who have been working through, I swear to you, 158 amendments on that bill today. I'm glad it's Colin, not me. And that will make a small administrative change that makes all the difference to trans people at key moments in their lives. We have come a long way together, but we are far from done yet. We are far from done when it comes to hate crime. Homophobic hate crime has more than doubled over the last 5 years. In 2016-17, police recorded little over 10,000 hate crimes against lesbian, gay or bi people. In the most recent statistics, there were over 28,000. In the past year, just the year-on-year rise, the homophobic hate crimes have gone up by 32%. That is the biggest rise since these kinds of hate crimes started to be recorded. Transphobic hate crimes are rising even faster. There's been a 240% rise in transphobic hate crimes over the last 5 years. And although improved reporting does account for some of that, it is clear that the rising tide of violent hate is real. Most recent data in the British Crime Survey makes it very clear that lesbian, gay and bi people are far more likely to be victims of violent crime than straight people are. So we need equality under the law when it comes to hate crime, so that homophobic, biphobic and transphobic hate attracts the same kind of sentencing as race-based crimes and faith-based crimes do. We need a systematic overhaul of policing so that LGBTQ plus communities, particularly LGBTQ plus communities of colour, can have faith in the idea of reporting hate crimes to the police. And we need to invest time and money in community initiatives, and particularly in doing a good job of inclusive sex and relationships education. So we're building a much more accepting and inclusive society. We are not done when it comes to trans people's rights and trans people's inclusion in society. So I'm just going to tell you what you're looking at here because you might not know this, but most of our legacy media, I like calling them that, it's a bit side-eye, but there you go, have a whole section on their website called transgender or transgender issues. They have a whole section, and I've deliberately given you The Guardian as well as the Mail because they all do. That's wildness. We, right now, are living through a manufactured moral panic that targets the trans community, and it rivals the worst excesses of the 80s and 90s. So this year, in the first 6 months of the year, the legacy press, in 3 of those months, published over 800 hostile articles about trans people. There was 1 month when they published 1,000 hostile articles about trans people in 1 month. That's around 33 articles a day. It's incredible. And that's a community that represents less than 1% of our population. So for those of you in the audience that are cis like me, I just want you to pause for a minute and imagine what it would feel like to have pretty much every mainstream media outlet pumping out horrible content about you every day. Trans people are waiting for years and years to access the healthcare that they need to live their lives to the full. Gender identity clinics right now are scheduling appointments, first appointments, for people that got referred more than 4 years ago. If that continues, if they continue to see people at the same rate, somebody who gets referred now won't be seen for nearly 10 years. That healthcare system is broken. It is breaking trans people. Trans people face rising hate crime on our streets, rising discrimination in our workplaces, they face bullying in schools, and they are the constant topic of a public debate that ranges from spiteful at best and dangerous at worst. So we need to stop supporting and amplifying content that demonizes or objectifies trans people. We need to invest in a gender-affirming healthcare system that works and is person-centered. We need to improve our human rights frameworks and implement policies that protect trans people in their day-to-day lives. So yes, reform the Gender Recognition Act, but think also about trans inclusion guidance for schools, clarifying that non-binary and gender fluid people are protected from discrimination in the workplace. Think about hate crime parity. We are not done when it comes to protecting our communities from abuse. So right now, conversion practices that seek to change or suppress a person's sexual orientation or gender identity, are legal here in the UK. It's legal to harm us. It's legal to advertise harming us. It's legal to charge for harming us. About 5% of LGBTQ plus people in the UK have been pushed to engage with a conversion practitioner. About 3% of us have been directly harmed. The risks for LGBTQ people of colour and faith are very high. Black and Asian LGBTQ plus people are twice as likely to be pushed to engage with conversion practitioners. And Muslim LGBTQ plus people are incredibly likely to be pushed to engage. Around 20% of queer Muslims have been pushed to engage with a conversion practitioner. And trans people are at greater risk, about twice the risk of a cis person like me. Yet despite that, the government currently intends to exclude trans people from a ban. So we need a ban on conversion practices that makes them illegal and protects all LGBTQ plus people, no exceptions. We need a ban without loopholes for faith, without loopholes that say that we can consent to our own abuse. And we need investment in support for survivors and training for frontline professionals who can spot those that are at most risk. Could go on and on. Because we are far from done on healthcare, we are far from done on mental health, we are far from done when it comes to protecting LGBTQ plus refugees or engaging with the experiences of LGBTQ plus people of faith. We have work to do, people. I love Laverne Cox. She's a bit of an idol of mine. When you put love out into the world, it travels and can touch and reach people in ways we never expected. We have work to do, but we're going to do that work together. So what might that look like when we think about the role of popular culture, and in particular the role of advertising? First of all, every single person here has the potential to be a catalyst for positive change. You can put love out into the world in tiny and important ways. You can work for LGBTQ plus inclusion in your workplace, including working with us at Stonewall through the Diversity Champions scheme. You can embrace and support LGBTQ plus activism in your community. You can buy goods and services from LGBTQ plus creatives. You can be visible as an amazing LGBTQ plus person yourself. But within the context of your organizations, you can do work and give advice that has the potential to send much bigger ripples out into the world. I'm going to start with the tough stuff. You can stop funding hate, right? Think about where the money gets spent. Remember that information I gave you about press coverage, those hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of articles a month that get published about trans people? Sending a clear message about the world you want to do business in, about how you select your partners, could help change that picture. And this is a fantastic organisation called Stop Funding Hate. You should support them if you don't already. They're absolutely amazing. I'd love to just, if we can, play the video. Do I press the button to make that happen? Let me see. Yes.
So I knew nothing about trans people when my daughter told me that she was trans. I'll never forget it, because we were in the car and we stopped somewhere and she said, "Mummy, I have to ask you a question." And she burst into tears and she said, "Is there an operation that can make me a girl? Because I'm not really a boy, Mummy, I'm a girl."
One night we were in bed reading a story and Emma turned around to me and said, "Mummy, my heart keeps making me feel like a girl and I can't make it stop."
I feel as though the media portrays us like we're not human beings.
I think newspapers exploit the issues just to sell their papers.
They have big, bold headlines that have a very negative impact, and it's there to make people click on it and go, "Oh, what's this?" And then you'll scroll down and there's the comment section, and in the comment section there's all these comments about how trans people are disgusting, or transgender people shouldn't deserve to live.
I've had a friend share a news article on social media. I made the mistake of reading some of the comments on that article, and this guy had messaged saying that he thought all trans people should just kill themselves. That's my kid you're talking about.
The headlines are creating an environment where those kind of attitudes and misinformation are circulated. It kind of legitimises in their mind acting out that antisocial behaviour. It starts with words and it ends with actions.
Personally, it feels really hurtful to realise that the articles that have made me feel so bad and has put so many trans people in danger are being funded by places where I shop at.
My message is to them, is think about your customers, your service users, who they are, because it includes trans people. Do you want to alienate us by continuing to fund hate?
Brands need to think about who they're advertising with. I could be a potential customer, I could even be your employee.
The thought that the national press could turn up and hound you just because of part of who you are, part of your personal identity, that's a really frightening thought for anybody, because it could be you.
I think journalists lose sight of the fact that this is real people, real lives and real world.
You need to really reconsider where you're putting your adverts, because it can make a massive difference.
Just give that a little moment, right? So So I think when we think about LGBTQ plus inclusion and advertising, we think a lot about these amazing creativities, these amazing adverts that get created. We actually need to think a lot more about money and where the money goes and where the advertising spend goes and what that money pays for. Something happy. Support LGBTQ plus talent, tell stories about LGBTQ plus people with LGBTQ plus people. Supporting authentic storytelling, nurtures talent, but it captivates audiences. Queer storytelling has changed the world before, and it will change the world again, over and over. And tell stories where LGBTQ plus people are woven through like a golden thread. Tell them everywhere, not just in markets where it's easy, but in markets where it's hard. Put that love out into the world and watch it grow. Because Harvey Milk was right. A world in which LGBTQ plus people can be out and proud. A world in which all LGBTQ plus people are free to live our lives to the full, free to be ourselves, is a world which is better for everybody. Do it for yourself, but do it also for them, he said. So I'm going to finish with this incredible quote. I always say my motto is, might as well be hung for a sheep as a lamb. I think Gertrude Stein said it better. I think this is what queer and genderqueer people teach the world. You look ridiculous if you dance. You look ridiculous if you don't dance. So you might as well dance. Thank you for listening.
Very inspiring, Nancy, genuinely. And if Harvey Milk's words weren't inspiring, your own. We are not done.
No.
And I hope that that's something that Outvertising can try and deliver for you. Well, you've touched on one of the things that we want to move on to next, which is the lack of robust information about the queer community here in the UK. So, and we were inspired by one of your predecessors, Jan Gooding, told us that it would be great if we could use insight to guide our strategy going forward. So that's what we have done. And I want to bring to the stage a couple of our colleagues. And what we're going to do is we're going to give you a sneak preview of what the queer community looks like in the UK, which we have done, I'm delighted to say, in partnership with YouGov. And we will release that in spring 2023. So to tell you all about it, please welcome to the stage the head of UK Products, Profiles and Brand Index at YouGov, Greg Dagger, and co-director of Insight at Outvertising and head of Insight and Strategy at PS London, Kendra Rogers.
Thank you. Thank you. Aha.
Going to take a side of the stage each.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Nancy. That was incredible. I feel like as a Canadian, so glad to see the trans data there. The design might need work, but I'll see if I can pull some strings on that. Hello. Thank you so much for being here. Greg and I are thrilled to be standing in front of you today, sharing some never-before-seen insight into the consumption patterns of the queer community in Great Britain. I'm Kendra Rogers. As mentioned, I'm the co-director of Insight and Agitation at Outvertising and the head of Insight and Strategy at PS London, and my pronouns are she and her.
Thank you, Kendra. And welcome, everyone. It's great to see so many people in the audience. I'm really excited to hear some of the discussions that are going to take place today. I'm Greg Dagger, head of products at YouGov, and my pronouns are he, him. YouGov, for those who don't know, is an international market research agency, data analytics firm, headquartered here in London.
Today, we will present a sneak peek into the findings of the Consumer Report focused on queer spending that is set to be released in spring 2023. As a remedy to a lack of robust and respected data, Outvertising teamed up with YouGov to produce a comprehensive report that digs into LGBTQ+ preferences and habits when it comes to brands. The presentation will include learnings from the larger report, including some surprising insights about the brand's preferred media consumption and differences in preferences across the community for sectors including automotive, FMCG, entertainment, and more.
To be amongst the first to receive this report next spring, have your phones ready at the end of this presentation, and you'll be sent a cheeky little link to make sure you're on that VIP list.
QR codes. So why do we set out to create a better understanding of the UK's LGBTQ+ community as consumers? Our motivation is rooted in Outvertising's purpose, which is to make UK advertising and marketing completely LGBTQ+ inclusive. And as brand marketers and agency folk, we couldn't find any easy to understand, bespoke, detailed consumer data on the LGBTQ+ community. We all agreed that that wasn't very inclusive, so we turned to our friends at the Market Research Society who agreed with us. And together, we set out to put that right. YouGov were quickly identified as a potential partner, and they enthusiastically shared our vision. And so we started working together to bring the first queer consumer report to life. So today's presentation is a preview. We hope that it sparks some ideas with all of the brilliant brains in the room by painting a picture of the UK LGBTQ+ community as consumers. And we will have a Q&A at the end. We really hope that you'll share your thoughts, your ideas, your questions that might help us guide the final report, the final output of the report. And if there's something that your clients or your brand have previously pondered about how to create more inclusive advertising, please reach out. We want to think about how we can include that in the report as well.
Definitely. The full report will be published in the spring of 2023. Starting to sink in now, isn't it?
Repetition.
To ensure it is as accessible as possible for everyone, the report will be free to download. We envisage it being an important part of every brand marketer's and agency folks' toolkit. Going forward, equipped with a much better understanding of the LGBTQ+ consumer, we're confident the insights the report contains will help everyone make their work more inclusive and more authentic, and as a result, more effective.
So, why does representation matter to business? Because we know that LGBTQ+ inclusion works. For example, according to a study by Kantar Millward Brown, 3 out of 4 LGBTQ+ themed ads outperform generic ads in driving brand recall. And Think with Google recently reported that 45% of consumers under 34 say they are more likely to do repeat business with LGBTQ+ friendly brands. It's about the economic value and so much more. Everyone in this room are privileged to work in the advertising and marketing sector. And because of that, we have a privilege and a responsibility to bring about greater acceptance in society by using the power of advertising for good.
Okay, so on to methodology. We all know methodology is important when analysing any data set. This is why we wanted to cover it off up front. YouGov Profiles has been used to extract all the insights presented today and in the future reports. YouGov Profiles is constantly collecting data every day of the year across thousands of people and thousands of questions. The Profiles data set we'll talk about today is weighted to be nationally representative, with weekly updates taking place. And the data you'll see today is from our dataset dated the 11th of September this year. The key to unlocking insights within profiles is using something called the Z-score. The Z-score helps us determine significant differences between the groups we're exploring further and what makes them different from the general population, for example. Today, there is a focus on the preferences of lesbian women, bisexual people, and gay men. For example, that's to mean respondents that selected their gender as female for gender and lesbian for sexuality within YouGov research. I'm sure you're thinking now, what about trans, non-binary, intersex people? Unfortunately, the sample sizes available at present are not robust enough to include today, but this is a key focus for us to address before the publication of the larger report next spring. With all research, some groups are harder to reach than others. At YouGov, we're very conscious of inclusion within the entire community. And we're always seeking to improve our data, a challenge we're looking to conquer next year.
And it's really important that Greg mentioned that because both Outvertising and YouGov stand in solidarity with all parts of the LGBTQ plus community. So when you read LGB within this presentation, it is because the data does not yet reflect all of the LGBTQ plus community, but it is our intention to rectify this representation within the larger report because we recognize the importance of standing with the entire community, especially in the midst of the rise in hate groups attempting to peel off sections of the community. Finally, before we dig in, just a quick bit of housekeeping. We'll be referring to NatRep a lot. This is a bit of a nerdy presentation, so I'm sorry. That is the nationally representative sample within Great Britain. We're going to get to the good part soon.
As Kendra said, the data presented is from Profiles Great Britain, so just to be completely clear, there's no data there from Northern Ireland, so we're looking at England, Wales, and Scotland. Okay, so our first visual aid. The pie chart on the left represents over 242,000 people that are within YouGov Profiles Great Britain. They're all aged 18 plus. In numbers, how that breaks down, there's over 200,000 people who identify as straight, over 9,000 who identify as gay or lesbian, and over 10,000 who identify as bisexual. We also have an other and a prefer not to say. So the other actually is about 3,000 people, and prefer not to say is about 10,500 people. So we've got a lot of data, and obviously we're talking about kind of not including trans people, for example. They may be included elsewhere. We can only infer that. We can't say for certain.
And we recognize that the community is broad and diverse, and this chart is overly simplistic. There are other fluid terms, such as pansexual, that are likely to be represented within this data, shown in the bisexual group, but not yet broken down as such due to current sampling. There are also various sexual orientations we'd like to break down further, including asexuality and the way it can interrelate with other sexual identities. The survey focused on these three demographics, straight, gay and lesbian, and bisexual, but we hope to continue to evolve the report to reflect our community's various sexual orientations in the future. We've said that repeatedly because it really does matter so much, and we want you to know that.
Definitely. Then moving on to the right-hand side of the screen, we've got the gender breakdown. Is the split surprising in any way? Did you suspect the split? I'll let that kind of sink in. And a question to think about for a few seconds. We should note here that while the larger report will include ethnicity and country of birth, that information won't be explored in today's presentation. Further data we'll present to you today will only build on your knowledge and your understanding of these groups. Kendra and I are hopeful you'll walk away from today having learnt something new. Okay, so our next chart. A shift is taking place. Remember that. Looking at historical data as well as the data captured in the here and now is important. A previous study conducted by YouGov builds on the understanding of sexuality as a spectrum. YouGov asked Britons where they would place themselves on the Kinsey scale of 0 to 6, where 0 is completely heterosexual and 6 is completely homosexual. This study was run in 2015 and again in 2019. What we're looking at here is those who are aged 18 to 24. So in 2019, those aged 18 to 24 versus those aged 18 to 24 in 2015. And 2015 to 2019, they're half as likely to identify as gay or lesbian, kind of the first red shape on the left. And then further changes have happened too. They're 8 times more likely to identify as bisexual, as we can see kind of in the middle. While we can't say for certain, absolutely, that again, we may infer that the increase in identification as bisexual could be indicative of the shift away from definitive categorizations of hetero or homosexual, explained by the expanding understanding of sexuality's fluidity and its existence on a spectrum. Okay, so within that same study, so kind of focusing out or zooming out and looking at kind of Britons as a whole, within that same study, we can see that 1 in 4 Britons place themselves somewhere in between 1 to 5. We as a group here today need to understand that the LGBTQ plus consumer group is much larger than we might have first thought. We can use what we learned today and available in the larger report to guide us, but we must also bear in mind change is inevitable. So being able to adapt what we do and how we do it is essential. So what is the opportunity out there? Okay, it's huge. So from profiles, we know that there's an estimated 7 million adults who identify as LGBTQ+. We can't accept that in isolation, absolutely not. There are many friends, families, members, allies, co-workers who are also part of this opportunity. And absolutely an opportunity that cannot be ignored?
In many ways, our community reflects the larger Nat Rep, but there were some key differences wherein the community of lesbian, gay, and bisexual people over-indexed when compared to the nationally representative sample. So our audience were younger, with 52% under the age of 35. They are more educated, and while where religion is a factor, we see similarities with the rest of the population reporting Christianity, Church of England, and Catholicism. A massive 64% report being atheist or agnostic.
So they are younger, more educated, less religious, but where do they live? So we saw that more of our LGB audience live in urban areas versus rural ones, slightly higher than the general population, or the Nat Rep. And focusing on the top counties where they live, Greater London, Manchester, and the West Midlands are top 3. You may have expected London in there, but would you have known about Manchester and the West Midlands? Exploring a level further and splitting it by these 4 groups here, bi women, bi men, lesbian women, and gay men. We can see that of those LGBT people living in London, a greater proportion is made up of gay men. Of those living in the West Midlands, it's a fairly even split. And in the east of England, for example, there are more bi and lesbian women. When planning regional versus national campaigns, this split could be something to bear in mind.
LGBT Brits are significantly more likely to describe themselves as being on the left end of the political spectrum at 46% when compared with 28% of the Nat Rep. Interestingly, that lean evens itself out slightly more in the center with a 7% difference over right wing with a 6% difference. Now that we understand who our audience is and a bit about their demographics, let's dig into the brand preferences. So,
LGBT people are active consumers of the same brands as the general public, but with a few interesting diversions, notably preferring Diet Coke, Schweppes, Odeon, and favouring Android and iPhone over Samsung. And thinking back to the methodology overview earlier, these stats were selected based on larger deviations in that Z-score. So all differences, no matter how big or small, are significant. Okay, digging a little bit deeper using the Z-score, we began to look at different audiences within the larger community when compared to their straight counterparts. This is where some really interesting anomalies emerged. What if I told you 22% of lesbians drive a Vauxhall in 2022, as opposed to 7% of straight women? Would that shift the way that you pitched ideas to Vauxhall?
Is there anyone in the room from eBay? Does it surprise you to know that you're performing better with lesbians than straight women? These are just the start of the type of insight that we can gather from YouGov's current customer database. And working in strategy, personally, I spend my days hunting for brilliant insights that we can use to build campaigns that truly resonate. And if I worked for or with Iron Brew, and I saw that 22% of lesbians regularly drink Iron Brew, as opposed to 4% of straight women, I'd start thinking about how we could take advantage of that brand preference and create something resonant with an audience that is already actively engaged with our brand. When looking at gay men and straight men, we saw some further interesting areas of over-index, namely with gay men being more avid users of Apple Music, Transport for London, and Deliveroo. They're also twice, I love that everyone's engaging with this, it's great. They're also twice as likely as straight men to be current customers of Pizza Hut, and that did urge me to order Pizza Hut while designing this deck, so it worked. Stuffed crust pizza, in fact. We then looked at bisexual people as compared with people who identified as straight within YouGov's platform and found that bisexual people are significantly higher users of Reddit. I think we actually might have some Reddit folks in the audience today. So let's chat about how Outvertising can help support you in activating on that brand preference. Our bisexual audience also over-indexed on entertainment like Pokemon and Spotify, a love of Ben & Jerry's, and the skincare products that Palmolive offer. So after getting excited by the opportunities for brand allegiance, we wanted to think about this differently. I hope we all recognize that when speaking to the LGBTQ+ community, you aren't speaking to one homogenous group. Our initial findings show that the LGB core have different preferences than lesbians, bisexual people, or gay men. And those different preferences paint very interesting pen portraits when it comes to things like culture, where there shows a preference for the Tate Modern among bisexuals, the Science Museum among lesbians, and the Royal Academy of Arts among gay men. We can see other key differences across high street retail, fast food and pubs, and TV and radio. If you had to list your favorite fast food or pub, where would you fall on this list?
I'm a fan of KFC, I have to say. To wrap up the brand preference section, we found even more interesting deviations from the NAT rep. I'm going to focus on one of these. Noticeably, lesbians are over-indexing in being customers of Royal Bank of Scotland. When we add that to what we discovered earlier, over-indexing on a love of Iron Brew and a likelihood to live in Scotland, a much deeper understanding of them is being formed. This is just the beginning.
And our gay men were more likely to drive a Range Rover and use the London Underground with minty fresh breath, so Listerine.
Okay, so we're going to move on to media now. Focusing on media consumption. A quick disclaimer, our LGB audience media consumption is largely similar to that of the general population. As with brands, we pulled out where the biggest differences are using the Z-score. Within streaming, there on the left-hand side, YouTube stands out by far, alongside Disney Plus and Netflix. But what are they watching? The Witcher, Stranger Things, Ozark? A question for another time. Come and find me at the end. What we can confirm today, though, is how they search for TV shows. Searching by theme is key, so binge-worthy or good versus evil. Recommendations are also high on the list. So think back to the wider opportunity. The influence of friends, family, allies, and co-workers. They'll play a part here too. We have Bloomberg top for TV channels, The Guardian for newspapers, and GQ for magazines. Thinking about news preferences. We had The Guardian, FT, and The Independent as top newspapers read. We explored their main source of news, and LGB are more likely to use a news app on a mobile or social network to keep up to date, significantly less likely to get their news from television. We're starting to understand they spend a lot of time online, and we're going to explore that a little bit further. So thinking about social media now, our LGB sample is more likely to be members of all popular social media platforms, with the exception of Facebook. So you can see the kind of differences there. Is this related to their age? We found out that half of them are kind of under the age of 35. Possibly something else. Any ideas from the audience at all? Anyone brave enough to contribute?
Brave enough to say something while in Meta's offices.
We
could tackle that at the end.
Okay. So, YouTube is a key media channel for LGB audience. We thought we'd try to understand the usage of it further. So, video sharing websites such as YouTube are used to watch sports. They are relied upon for advice when buying a new car. They're used for inspiration when cooking and for ideas about the next holiday destination. Think about what you use video sharing websites for. I'm sure it's very similar. And we actually found large similarities when comparing to the general population. But these were some of the significant differences. Our final insight snippet to share with you today is exploring LGBT consumers' online habits beyond video sharing websites and some of their attitudes towards ads. Our LGBT audience are more likely to engage with ads seen via social media than regular websites. That's 35% of them versus 22% of the NAT rep. Seeing offers on social media leads nearly a fifth to purchase. Wow. That is one fact you can take away and run with today. That is actionable insight. What about the third who agree ads help them choose what they buy? Or the 61% who love to recommend things for people to try? The size of the opportunity we spoke about earlier is growing, isn't it? Okay, that's a wrap. Kendra.
Okay, so what can we learn from all of this? And we created these slides for exactly what you were just doing, which is taking pictures of them, bring them, talk about them, let's have conversations.
Absolutely. Firstly, expect the unexpected. You aren't speaking to one homogenous group. As you've seen, the LGBT core have different expectations than lesbians, bisexual people, or gay men. And that's just where we could quantify.
And sometimes expect the expected. Some stereotypes ring true, some come up as blatantly false. You can't know until you look at the data, and when in doubt, always err on the side of due diligence. And there are tons of brilliant light bulb moments for brands and agencies to activate on. Unique campaign insights can be found within this community's consumption and preferences, and brand preferences can and should be encouraged.
And lastly, but most importantly, the point that was made at the beginning of our presentation, with a significant proportion of the UK's consumer spending tied to LGBTQ+ consumer footprint, brands would be wise to consider that the positive commercial impact of inclusion and representation is beneficial in reaching not just the LGBTQ+ community, but also their friends, family, allies, and co-workers.
Mark the date in your diary now, spring 2023 for the consumer report being published with the insights we've shared here, plus so much more from across the LGBTQ+ community, including trans plus insight.
We hope that you took away some ideas to get started with and that you can find more information and inspiration in our upcoming report.
Thank you so much for your time. And just as a final note, we are all volunteers at Outvertising, and we need more volunteer energy to get this report over the line. So if you would like to help compile the report, please come grab me during networking. Now we'd like to do some Q&A, and we'd like to invite up our colleague, Tishan Nicholas, who I think I see in the very back there, who's a member of the advertising community and analytics director at the 7 Stars, and who has been absolutely invaluable in putting together the report alongside Greg and myself. I didn't know if you were here.
Okay. Oh, got it. I like this. Yeah. This is our throwing mic. So be ready to catch it if you've got a question, okay?
Oh, gosh. Or we can pass it to you gently if you have no sports skills like I do. Does anyone have any questions or anything to share? Yeah.
First of all, thank you so much. I just thought I'd break the seal. What was the most surprising thing that you saw in the data that you kind of loved, that you haven't spoken about today?
Probably should have saved the iron brew one, because that was my favorite. I thought it was great. And also drank an iron brew. I think throughout going through the data, I just realized how susceptible I am to brands, because I kept going, ooh, I would like an iron brew. Oh, shoot. What is my Canadianism is not going to work. It's the drink that people sometimes have when they are a little bit hungover, and it's got electrolytes in it.
Lucozade.
Lucozade. Yeah, there was a large preference of Lucozade for both bisexual people and lesbians, so I thought that was interesting as well. And then I drank a Lucozade, which are nice even if you're not hungover.
Were there any particular brands that you thought weren't tapping into a preference that you found?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I think as you kind of said at the start, this is kind of the first of this type of project.
Yeah, show us more.
Undertaking. There's quite a few, to be honest. And I think that, hopefully, taking some of the stats from today and taking the report next year can help people to understand it, even if it's not specifically talking about that brand, maybe about that industry or that sector, or even just kind of habits or behaviours or trends that come through. You can definitely kind of think about that, take that on board, and take it back to your company, your organisation, whatever it might be.
There were lots of interesting. We're not going to be like, oh, your brand sucks. So we'd prefer to do the ones that are great. But it was really interesting to see that there are definitely under indexes. I guess there are preferences away from certain brands, and I think that's actually a great shout, because that's a really important opportunity for brands to be considering as well. The ones that are not resonating, why are they not resonating? Can we have some conversations about that? And we hope to explore some of that within the larger report.
Hi. You mentioned in one of those slides there that LGBTQ+ people are more likely to engage with ads on social media. Is there anything in the report that kind of establishes how LGBTQ people pay attention across the board, not only social media but digital display, for instance, YouTube TV, in relation to the nat rap, just to get down with the lingo there?
I don't know.
We haven't included that, but that's a great shout, and we definitely will. Will you come chat with me after?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I guess in some of those hard-to-reach groups that are underrepresented in the quant, do you have plans to pursue that through Qual? I'm a qualitative right?
Yes.
I mean,
Yeah,
well,
that's exactly our plan. And I think part of what we're working with YouGov on is how we want this to be, despite being a lot of work, a yearly thing if we can do it, right? So how do we start to help YouGov to make sure that we have that data in the quant, but then also how do we augment in the meantime with qualitative is something we're thinking about. And I want to talk to you. I think you want to help me with this.
I think I might. Yeah.
Any more questions in the room?
You mentioned about TfL being one of the brands on that, but I wanted to know what you expected for TfL. Like brands like TfL, you have to use no matter what. So, what would you expect them to use with this data? So, for instance, the reason why I asked that is that you have to use the tube and you have to use the bus systems, and it's a bit like Network Rail. You have to use those to get in and out of London. So, what would you like to see them using this data for, and how would you like them to apply it throughout their systems?
Yeah, I think you can kind of establish facts and say, of the people who use our service, who are they, what do they look like, how can we engage them? Taking the media preferences, how can we talk to them? And then it's not just in isolation, that's your starting point, that's our group. And then we try and learn more about them. So, I don't know, how likely are they to walk to work? How can we make sure they do use our service? How can we make sure that we are putting ourselves out there as an organisation that is for everyone? So, yeah, it's interesting. We kind of put data together, but the interpretation of that, how you use it, how you action it, it could be lots and lots of different ways. But I think that's your starting point. That's okay. We've got some data of people who use our service, and what else can we learn about them? Or even, we had no idea that group of people used our service, or that proportion of people used our service as well.
I think the other thing that was interesting is that because the community was over-indexing, that I feel like there's a lot of little nuggets in there that hopefully people can take away and go, hey, TfL, you're already running a campaign, but what if we made it bigger? Because actually, we're seeing that there's an over-index of the LGBTQ+ population that is taking Transport for London. So I think it's what we were hoping to do with today's presentation, and you made a great point of we couldn't possibly include everything we wanted to, was to maybe give you some nuggets that you can go, hey, I actually work with this brand, or hey, I actually and within this media company, I'm going to take this stat to them, and that might open the doors because sometimes those hard facts can be really great conversation starters.
We saw a lot of stats about consumption. I was curious if your research also focused on representation and their feelings or their opinions on how the community is able to see themselves. I want to say the big screen, but we are also digital, but you know what I mean. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we have a lot of attitudinal data and psychographic data that will help us understand more about how people feel, where they kind of lean. And there's some questions in there, and I've got my colleague Thomas is in the room, so if I forget anything, Thomas, just shout up. Around, I want to see more people like me in adverts and things like that. So again, not included today. There's a lot of data that we collect, and it's about finding those most insightful bits. But also, there's going to be so many questions in the room that we don't know what we're going to answer. But yeah, we have attitudinal data in there that I think would really open the door around that kind of that question, especially one that sticks in mind is that. Want to see more people like me in advertising, or I relate to adverts that, include me. But yeah. Thomas, I can't. Is there anything else you want to add?
Just from the, can this work? Yeah. Just off the top of my head, there's certain questions such as I relate better to adverts where I see real people in as well, and it kind of all ties in. So what you can start doing is building out that pen portrait of how this relates. And in a way to add on to the question about TfL, it wouldn't strictly be about these people use TfL, but also a lot of things about advertising around at bus stops and tube stations as well. So it's not just TfL per se, but the whole ecosystem around, say, the commuter journey that you can start building out a picture on.
Which is what places?
I've been absolutely amazed by how much data exists within YouGov profiles, and it feels like every day we're kind of learning new things. You mentioned that you can actually you've asked people what animal they most identify with. Which is gonna go in the report. So I haven't analyzed that yet, but I will let you know as soon as we do. But there's just you can go down rabbit holes while eating Pizza Hut for hours.
Stuffed crust. Any more questions? Okay.
Hello. I guess I wanted to understand a bit more about how age plays a part in this, because I think that overall population is great, but I think it gets skewed quite dramatically when you take into account age. So how has that been accounted for in the data? And is there already a skew that exists within the YouGov population anyway? So do you only look at data from 18 plus, for example?
So the profiles data set that is 18 plus. Within the UK, I think we have about 2.5 million members who answer questions or surveys for us. So we can go to a lower age. It depends on what the project is. With the profiles data set, it's kind of almost an ecosystem, and that's weighted to be nationally represented. So we're absolutely trying our best to make sure that we're covering off everyone or trying to include everyone within it. Obviously, we saw from the kind of breakdown of sexuality that we don't ask, or we don't give all the answer options that we could. So that's something that Thomas and I are feeding back to our data team to try and resolve, and as I said, kind of hopefully in time for next year as well. But then, we've got qualitative data where we can add in when we need it. In terms of skews, I'm not sure. I think it depends on how you cut that data. Real kind of political answer there for you, but I think we can have a chat. I've got my laptop with me, so if you wanted to explore anything after this session or kind of later on, then we can delve into that profiles data set. If it's specific questions, whatever it might be. So.
Thanks.
Adding to that, it's not working. Adding to that, I think where we notice there is a skew, such as the political spectrum, is something that we can deep dive into and look at that, say, at an age split. And so when we add it to the overall report, we'll overlay, actually, these are the nuances we're seeing at an age level. But yeah, that'll be the bigger report. So yeah, sign up, QR code, do it.
Spring next year, did you say?
Awesome. Thank you all so much.
All right. I mean, I think I've literally just had my mind blown, and it's true. I do love the Tate Modern. So, do you know what I mean? Thank you, Kendra and Greg. On to our first panel. So, we're just about to start talking in this panel about LGBTQ plus networks, or ERGs. So I'd like to invite our esteemed speakers to the stage. It's going to be led by Emmy Mendoza, our co-director of events. Are you going to do that?
Thank you, Lucy.
Do that? Okay. You got it?
Amazing.
Any clicker?
Yes, where is the clicker?
Okay,
Thank you. So I am absolutely thrilled to be here. I was saying to so many people that it's been our first big event after COVID, so please give yourself a round of applause to be here today sharing this space with us. And yeah, so this topic is very rooted in my heart, and I'm really happy to be able to share the stage and bring some amazing people from the industry. So I want to welcome David from WPP Unite, Ari from Havas Pride, and Claire from Publicis Egalite. So please, guys, make your way to the stage. Amazing. So my name is Emmy. My pronouns are he, him. You might be wondering, why the hell is a yoga teacher doing on the stage? Wow. Don't worry, I'm not gonna ask you to go into a headstand right now. We will leave that for the after party.
Hello.
I've been doing events for Outvertising for around 5 years, and in my previous life, I used to work on media. So Outvertising is kind of the only thing that keeps me rooted to the industry. And I'm really happy to be here with friends and catching up with lots of people today. So I want to leave you guys to do a round of an introduction. First of all, I wanted to say that the reason why this topic is so important to me, and you can tell by my accent, I don't sound British, even though I have a British passport. I am originally from Colombia. So when I came to the UK 12 years ago, I always describe my experience as coming out in some random beautiful place like Alice in Wonderland. And that was that I felt when I landed in the UK in February 2011. 2011, yes, 2011. And the reason why this is so important is because being a person of color, Latino, gay, living in London, I actually felt a place for me to be able to express myself, my identity, and that was something that working in big corporations like Dentsu, WPP at Mindshare, OMD International allowed me to really get my, excuse my language, shit together and really get to embrace my own expression and be able to translate that into the work that I did with so many organizations on setting up networks to really support our brothers and sisters and being able to support amazing work with clients. So that's basically why I wanted to have this space for us to learn from amazing people that are already doing really good job in the industry. So I'm gonna pass it over to you, David.
Hi, can
Hello.
I just first of all say thank you for titling this Networks rather than my least favorite acronym in our community, which is ERG. It's not sexy. Also, we're not a resource, just to point that out and be clear on that. Hello, yeah, lovely to meet you all. I'm David, and I had the honour of kicking off WPP Unite a couple of years ago with, and I'm looking around this room, a whole load of brilliant people who've become colleagues and friends, and I'm very grateful to be here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ari.
Thank you for having me. I'm Ari. I'm not American, I'm Filipino. I just sound American because of school situation. But I am very humbled to be here, considering I'm a nobody in Havas, except for just, this loud, queer individual in their front of house who basically, explodes rainbow all over the place. And I second what David said. I'm so glad that they titled this as Networks and not ERG, because honestly, I just hate those acronyms.
Hello, Claire.
I'm Claire. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the co-lead for Égalité. So Publicis is a French company, so everything we do is French, so you have to say égalité, which means equality, by the way. I'm also very glad and very humbled to be here today at the Advertising and also speaking to other network leads, and my other co-lead, Paul, is sitting in the room today as well.
Thank you so much.
Same stage.
I know, right? This is gonna be a bombshell. So let's crack on, guys. So I met Ari last year, I think he was, in an event at Havas. When I first arrived to the reception, I was actually with Mark. We were delivering a conference. And when I saw Ari throwing the rainbows all over the place, I thought to myself, oh my God, she is working it. And it's so amazing, to be able to work into an organization as big as Havas and see that there is a queer person in the reception, working everybody. She's being respected. Like, seriously, she's a lioness in the reception. Like, everybody is really supportive, and Ari has an stage. If you ever go to Havas, you will see her in action, and she's absolutely amazing. She was recently, you're being recently part of you're a coacher now, Havas Pride, right? Which is amazing. So one of the things that Ari was telling me before is that one of the things that she has found inspiring and interesting is how Havas Pride has supported her self-journey in terms of her own expression, but also how Havas Pride is kind of harnessing that experience from queer people in the organization to be able to influence amazing work that is already being produced. So, Ari, I would love you to share your experience with some of the projects that you have been leading yourself with the team, and also how that has been fueling your own expression, also the support of people working at Havas Pride.
Yeah, I mean, it's only just been very recent that I got appointed as the co-chairman of Havas Pride. But prior to that, I've kind of always had this idea that it doesn't matter how kind of bottom you are in the kind of, the what do you call this? The triangle of a company. You can always affect change in any which way possible as long as you have the voice to make it happen. And it's always just a case of, it doesn't matter whether it's a small or as a big impact or whatever, it's you pushing forward to make those changes. And one of the things that I'm very proud of is just about, we were kind of getting back from like, you know, the whole debacle of like Miss Rona raging rampage throughout the entire world. One of the account managers at Havas just basically said, oh, we want to have like your input on like a project that we're doing with Durex. And it was one of those things where I definitely felt, oh my gosh, what is going on? Like, we're gonna be consulting on like a brand. This is like, we've moved past that whole kind of just creating a safe space for queer people within the four walls of Havas to exploring and venturing out and making sure that a message is as authentic as much as possible when it comes out to the real world. And we sat for a very long time, like in and outs of meetings, like consulting back and forth with like emails and making sure that this particular campaign, My Sex, My Way for Durex, came out as authentically as much as possible with the correct language and the correct voicing and portrayal of each and every individual kind of like experience of like queerness in general. Low-key, I really wanted to be a part of this campaign, but they said I needed to have a partner, but unfortunately I didn't, so I couldn't be a part of it. But that being said, you know, I was still part of like the background stuff, which I was still really, really proud of. It was just one of those things where it was a way for the brand to make sure that they're taking the narrative and using the narrative from queer people and putting it out into the world that this is the type of activity that doesn't necessarily have to be normalized. And well, every type of activity I meant is it can be normalized. It doesn't have to be just one way. And that's why they titled the campaign My Sex, My Way. And, you know, I mean, I'm pretty sure all of you have your own way of doing things in the bedroom. So, you know, this is why, like, the whole thing spoke to me. And I was just like, I'm so happy to be a part of this. And on top of this, this was prior to kind of like me being co-chairman and everything. I was just kind of like being a part of the group as their trans and non-binary representative. It helped me see a different perspective that networks within the company that you work for is not only there to just create that initial safe space for people to be involved in. It's also a way for a company to utilize whatever good everyone has to offer in any type of capability that they have or whatever position that they have on an insight on how to make sure something is delivered to the most authentic level as much as possible. And that's why when this came out and I first saw the billboard, I actually legitimately cried because it was just one of those things where it made me felt like as a queer person, I was seen. As someone who is born in an immigrant family and I came here, I never went to university, being a part of such a grand kind of campaign in like the background of it made me felt like I feel very seen, like I feel very supported. And that's kind of like what propelled me to make sure that like what like Emmy witnessed when, and Mark witnessed when they walked into, you know, the HKX building is that like, I need to always and constantly be that representation for people like me. So whenever you walk through the Havas building, or anyone who walks past the Havas building, I want them to see that there's a queer individual here. And like what was said earlier is that like, if you see a queer person doing amazing, that also gives you that self of like, I can do that too. And that's ultimately what I want to happen as a whole, is that like people who are either like in the younger generations or like the older generations. I mean, I am old. Yeah, I am old. But it's to just have this sense of comfortability and just, you know, be your authentic self as much as possible. Like the words that I live by is never hide away your true authentic self because the world deserves to see it.
Yes, absolutely.
And you know, that's why I'm so proud to be a part of this platform, to have been invited by Outvertising to kind of just share with you guys my experience and the importance of having a network within your companies and how it not only promotes that safe space initially that I mentioned, it basically creates a space for everyone to flourish and do the best that they can do and always put their best foot forward.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much. And I think what you have said is so powerful. That goes to some conversation that I had with somebody ages ago when they were saying, we want to set up a network, but we don't have any queer people working in the organization. And that was what they was actually stopping them by. And I said to them, this is ridiculous because you don't actually know who might be already queer, or they might have a queer experience already happening in their family. They may have a bisexual children. Maybe their mom is lesbian. You don't really know what happens in people's life. So having the network and being able to really drive the representation and creating a space for people to be their authentic self is so important. And I think that if there is anyone in this room that works in an organization that might not as big as, you know, the big organizations that we have in the industry, and if you don't have a network, definitely there is an opportunity for you to bring people together. If you don't have queer representation, just use your allies, talk with people in advertising, catch up with people in other networks, because the opportunity is that even if you don't have anyone queer at the moment, you don't know, maybe your next CEO might be a trans person. So you have to be prepared in order for you to be changing, maybe doing that.
Exactly. Like having allies is equally as much as important as having queer representation within a company, because that's what kicks it off. It's like you giving that presence of this sort of equal opportunity for everyone. So that's absolutely amazing.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Ari. I love
You're
that.
welcome.
Thank you. So going to kind of talking about the power of representation. So I met David. How many years ago?
You're wearing fabulous shoes then as well.
Trying to every day. So I met David years ago in an event from WPP. We click. So when this opportunity came around, and in my previous job at Mindshare, David started leading WPP Unite. So back then was just UK chapter, and now it's an international force. And I think that there is so much stuff that you can definitely share with us today in a couple of minutes, because I really think that David himself has that vision. Is that person that is like an entrepreneurial person, but has that mission to bring something that is really small to now have representation of WPP Unite across India, New Zealand, Australia, the US. It's just insane. I am absolutely proud to be an ex-WPP person and see from the boundaries all the amazing job that you guys are doing. So David, can you please share with us some light around how can people think about taking the networks to the next level in order for them to be able to support people in other territories?
I think it's, if that's the right thing to do for your network. I mean, we can't shy away from the fact that WPP is huge and incredibly global. And I think to answer some of those questions, it helps to explain the journey that we've been on slightly. So Unite was founded in the UK, and it has the name Unite because, I mean, I'm sure everybody here would agree, we just have a fundamental belief that when all parts of our community support all other parts of our community, we rise, the L supporting the B, supporting the T, supporting the G. So there's no point in trying to isolate different parts of the community from one another. We're stronger together. And actually, when you start applying that thinking and that belief to the structure of WPP, so many brilliant, fantastic agencies of different sizes and shapes actually you start appreciating that there's more to be gained by bringing the community together across these different agencies in a shared space, in a shared community. So it started in the UK, by the time that we'd started to gain some traction, we had a really open source attitude towards sharing everything we were doing. We were giving other markets who'd got in touch, seeing some of the work that we'd done, saying, how do we do that? It was like, here is the workshop that we ran. We're going to send it to you. Here are the templates that we made. Here are the people that we spoke to. And we just had a really open approach to creating Unite and helping other markets launch it. And the way that we use Unite in different markets varies because, again, we're talking about the LGBT experience globally, right? It varies from country to country. And that's the attitude that we've had with the way that Unite shapes and molds. So in the UK, for example, Unite has been taken into many WPP agencies as their agency-specific network. So, there's Chewy here from Essence Mediacom Unite, and James is here, who is part of Grey Unite. I'm part of the AND Partnership Unite. So in the UK, that's what works for us. In America, they've got far older, longer legacy networks. But what they didn't have was a cause that brought them together around key issues. So it works more as an umbrella in the USA and also in Australia and New Zealand. Whereas in India, again, a totally different experience. What was needed is something that isn't thrown around within the individual agencies, but something that's very much branded WPP Unite, that is a safe space where people can gather virtually, gather physically, share those parts of their identities that are perhaps less safe to share outside of the doors of a WPP office in India. So it's really been created with a real share attitude. And I think that mentality is what has inspired such brilliant work coming out of each of those markets under Unite. This is a snapshot of some of the work that we've done over the last year in the UK. And I just think there's so much to be said for empowering people and giving them stuff that looks good. Like, it sounds so basic. I mean, I'm a brand strategist. I work in a creative agency. I'm like, it's got to look good. And we were sat down, we were like, the very first thing that people told us is, I try to do these things in my agencies, but I'm not a designer. I use Comic Sans and I stick a poster on the back of the toilets and no one comes to my talk. It was like, right, we are going to pull together the designers who want to be involved, like the brand strategists, the creators, and actually create a real open source identity that everybody would be proud to use. That's been one thing that's really glued a lot of different activity together. But by bringing together the different agencies in the UK with their individual committees, what it means is you start kind of approaching a lot of things far more creatively. So last year we created a rainbow of content that was all about the intersection between the queer experience and the advertising world, inspired by the individual colours on the Pride Progress flag and what that means. We approached LGBT History Month in a different way. We were like, let's break it down. Why doesn't Wavemaker cover her story? Mediacom will cover their story. The AND Partnership will cover our story. Let's actually approach this as a team. And it goes on from training that's been going on, different events, marching together at Pride for the first time this year as one collective company. There were 70 of us marching from, I think, 20-ish different WPP agencies, and that feeling of collectiveness and together was extraordinary. But the other thing that we have been doing is, if that's all about making our workplaces really inclusive, there's a lot of us here who also share the belief that we're in an industry where we just can't help ourselves. We're going to tamper with the work to make sure we're seen within it, right? So be a power force when you're going to do that. And what we've started to do is bring together LGBTQ plus people from different agencies who want to work on things together in a non-siloed way around causes that they care about, campaigns that they want to be involved in. An example is in North America. A team of agencies came together as WPP Unite to create what's called the Reality Flag campaign, which was the human rights campaign to pass the Equalities Act in North America and ensure that all LGBT people in every single state have equal rights. That was kind of our first big foray into work. And there's other exciting things that are going on as well. But one example that Emmy asked me to share is this summer, we approached Pride in London and we said, we would like to see an incredibly representative Pride this year that brings it back to its roots and that is more grounded in the heritage of 50 years of marching in the UK and that spirit of protest, and we would really like to make that for you. And we did that with an entirely LGBTQ team, from the account execs booking the rooms, to the media planners, to the production on the shoot, to the brand strategists, to the designers. Every single part of this campaign was entirely created by LGBTQ plus folk. And that is kind of magical. And I hope you see that reflected in the work that we're about to play.
Thank you. The video is actually here, so we actually gonna press play because I think it's a really cool piece of content that deserves to be showcased one more time. Yeah.
We've been marching in the capital since the flag was first flown. Picketing when newspapers made villains of heroes. Revolting until they decriminalized love. Fighting for the right for all to give blood. Screaming stop when Section 28 was passed. Battling to make sure it would never last. Rising up when they ignored the gay cancer. And refusing to accept death as the answer. Because our reality is not a condition. And all our genders deserve recognition. We march for the right to walk down the aisle. And we march still with a knowing smile. These city streets are paved in our queer victories. For the next 50 years, we need us all to make new history. To come together and demand our rights. Fight till us trans folk no longer fear for our lives. To take to the streets of this great London town. Against the crimes on those of us who are black and brown. To banish the secrecy, prejudice and shame. Make autonomy of our intersex bodies ours to claim. To raise our fists and shout till we're hoarse. Until conversion therapy is banned for all. So come together, it's time to cry. We march for all our pride.
I'm very proud of that, but for me, that is an example of queer creativity, and everybody in this room has the power to make that happen by the nature of just going to your jobs and being who you are, because you work on, you put things out in the world that make, that everybody sees. Like, you have the power to make stuff like that happen. So, little rallying cry there. And look, it looks really pretty as well. Told you, I work at a creative agency. So how we did it very briefly, just in terms of that global question at the beginning, my advice would be incredibly, incredibly open if you are planning on scaling things up. So we started with a working group of about 25 of us in the UK from across different agencies, and we sweated the hell out of a workshop. And we got really clear on, like, what should the name be? What should the spirit be? Who do we want to be the senior sponsors? Document all of it, get it down, get it in writing, and make it really shareable and accessible. What we then did is we brought more people together and we broke everyone out into about 9 different work streams. The idea being that it should be the community that shapes what Unite is. So deciding, how do the comms work? What's the governance structure? How long do co-chairs exist? How long do co-chairs have their roles for before they're passed over? So we got really into the detail of it. We then launched the visual identity and we open sourced it to everyone, and we put out a rallying cry saying we're looking for extraordinary leaders who want to take charge of this and run it in their markets. And I know it sounds like there's some magic secret sauce about how we've made Unite go global, but that was it. I think you need to look for people who want to create something extraordinary, but for people who don't always want to have to lead it. Because the thing is that all of these spaces should exist for people to be there and not feel like they need to be weighed down by the responsibility of running it personally. It should be accessible, and there's far more that can be achieved when you all work on something like that together. So.
Amazing. Thank you so much, David. Really,
Thank you.
really inspiring. Thank you. So we all agree that community engagement, and especially supporting underrepresented communities, is a pivotal role of any network, not just an LGBTQ+, but anything relating to race, ethnicity, religion. So I want to invite Claire to share some really interesting insights around the word that publicis égalité, if I'm saying it right, thank you. My Spanish is better than my French. has done to support the Black queer community, but especially the trans community. You shared with us that earlier this year, Egalite launched the policies for trans and non-binary people in the workplace, but most amazing, they're actually supporting with actual money for people to have their treatments done. So, which is something amazing. So I would like you to please share with us something around that process, just so people in the audience can, get some inspiration from them to bring the trans policies into a workplace.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if at the end of those 10 minutes, everyone will be able to kind of like roll out trans policies in their companies. That's the hope. But I think if we go back a little bit to what was talked about in this panel already, so Egalite has existed since 2019. It was the first network that was created at Publicis in the UK. It's the oldest one and it's also the biggest one. So we have about 250 members just for the UK. And I think the reason why I'm saying this is because you need those foundational years of being able to provide for a safe space and build your network and create the templates and do the networks, etc., before you can move on to really sort of being so influential at a group level. And then I'd say the second thing is every company network is only ever going to be as important and as powerful as the company itself wants it to be. So if you have an amazing network but you don't have any support internally, you're not going to go very far. And I think everyone here on this panel in this room is lucky enough to be working for companies who are putting diversity and inclusion at the forefront and as a big priority for the company as a whole. So linked to that, I think, is the fact that so our network will be led by a board of 8 members, but then we also have 2 executive sponsors. And what our executive sponsors do is that they meet at the C-level and they're our voice there. So when we knew that Publicis was going to roll out trans policies, this was at the back of a lot of work that we had done, meeting with the executive sponsors, on a monthly basis, meeting with the head of DE&I on a bi-weekly basis, and just being able to consult and talk together. So I don't think there's a magic formula. I think the best formula is to always be open and to communicate to people and to try and create allyship at different levels within your company. This is what's going to help you to kind of like shape and really influence the companies and the culture inside as a whole. So once we had done that and once we knew that the trans policies were going to be rolled out, we just thought about what is the best way to support the employees when this is going to be rolled out. And so there was a few things. So the first thing is that once the trans policies were posted, we got a lot of questions, and the questions are not going to go to like your head of HR. They're going to come to Egalite. They're going to come to the board members. They're going to come through the Teams channel. So what we did is that we gathered those questions and we passed them on to the people who had the best answers and also the best training for that. So that's the sort of being a first port of call was a big thing once those trans policies were rolled out. I think a second thing, you mentioned it, David, having lots of trainings that are provided within the company. So for all employees, but also within the LGBTQ community, there is a lot of misknowledge about, the T in the umbrella. So really pushing for and promoting all the trainings that were available through Publicis, but to our community, and saying this is really something that you should take an hour and a half or 2 hours this quarter to attend, is also something I think that makes a difference and that will help once those policies are rolled out for people to embrace them. And I think the last thing is we talked a bit about the responsibility that companies and network have in terms of where we invest resources, whether it is time or money. So, and this is not, I think Pride in London did a great job, and it's not to say some events are better than others, but this year we had a clear focus within our network to support trans events and to support smaller local grassroots events. So we decided that we're not going to march at Pride in London as part of Publicis UK, but we're going to march at Trans Pride. So we had that's us. We had a whole group of people coming together and gathering and supporting Trans Pride. And then we did the same for UK Black Pride. So it was the very first time this year for Publicis to be present at UK Black Pride, which was an amazing event if some of you attended. And being able to be there with a stall and with a group of people and to connect. And this is not to market yourself or to kind of like sold the brand, but it's really to say, Publicis is a safe environment, and it is also a company where there's zero tolerance towards any sort of like transphobic or homophobic behavior. And us being there shows that we're walking the extra mile and that we're investing time and resources and making it safe for all employees to join. So I think in terms of what you can do as a network, if you have policies from the company that are being rolled out, I'd say those would be my pieces of advice. So yeah.
Thank you so much, Claire. Thank you so much. So we have 1 minute and 50. 1 minute and 50 seconds left. Oh my God. I didn't have my gin and tonic. Thank you.
It's like countdown.
Do we have any questions from the audience?
Shall we do an American football throw? I mean,
yeah, let's go for it.
Probably won't trust me because
this lady here in the front. Okay, then we go to you. Hello. Hi, Polly.
I don't know if you can hear me. Hi, Emmy. You talked a little bit, Claire, about supporting underrepresented groups and underrepresented prides. I think that's a really good point. There's about 200, I used to be on the board of Pride in London, there's about 250, I think, prides in the UK at the moment. I think next year, I think in the summer next year, trans in the city who had an event last night are actually going to be doing something at, now I'm going to think of the Pride, it's somewhere like in the West Country. It would be really good to see brands get behind that and support them. They did a great event yesterday. Trans community is really struggling at the moment. I was at an event yesterday where 600 people turned up and were in a space where they could be themselves. It would just be amazing to get the message out for a small pride that it's a safe space for trans people to be. So my message, I guess, it's not a question, is it would be great for a brand to, I'm on the trans city board, to get behind that community this year. Prides are great, but prides get a lot of promotion, but the trans community really needs support.
Thank you, Polly. Let's do one question, guys, and then if you have more questions, please come and grab us in the break.
Is that okay? Sorry. Hi, yeah, Ari, you mentioned talking about people coming to you at Havas to work on the campaign.
Yeah.
And because you are, so visibly queer and happy and proud about it, I was wondering if you had a perspective on sometimes anyone being othered, whether that be for race or for being queer, and then being approached to work on something, and they might not want to because they feel like, oh, you're just asking me because I'm queer, let's say. Do you have thoughts on that, or how to approach that within a company, within a brand, where you want someone to help you with something and work on something and be included, but they might not want to feel like you're only coming to them for that reason? So I'm interested to know how the account manager approached you.
So for us, it was more so, it wasn't like a type of case where it was like a pressurized type of environment where we just basically got told, we need you to do this type of situation. I think ultimately, before myself and the members of Havas Pride ultimately decided to participate in the consultation process of the whole project, was we had a discussion, and we wanted to make sure that it wasn't going to be a case where each and every one of us will be tokenized to just because we are this, that we have to be, and it's like, it's just basically something that we just have to give type of situation. I think that it was approached in a way where it was very respectful to each and every one of our personal experiences. In general, I think that it's always really difficult to kind of approach somebody to ask them sort of questions that particularly sort of relates to their personal experiences, because like you don't want that person to feel like they're being tokenized because they're this individual. And I think it all comes into play of, and I greatly appreciate this, that like I think the account manager's view was, at the end of the day, these are kind of, you know, these are our colleagues, and we have to make sure that like their personal experiences and their views and POV on any given situation is fully respected. And whether or not they wanted to participate, yes or no, should always be a question right at the very beginning. And that's like, you know, the advice that I would give.
One thing off that, I'm so glad to hear you say that, because I just think everybody should really take away as well. There is a difference between somebody working at a marketing or whatever agency. It's a difference between somebody who is LGBTQ+ working in an agency on marketing or whatever, and an expert on LGBTQ+ marketing.
Exactly.
Just to be really blunt about that. So I'm glad to hear that happened for you.
No, of course, because like it's really, what David said is really important, because you don't want just some random persons, or what do you call this, on a agency scale. You don't want it to be, how do I say this being political?
Just say it.
You don't want it to be that person's personal opinion and it to be represented by that single individual. It needs to be at a scale where it still needs to be a representation of your company, if that makes sense. Like, you can't solely base a project based off of like my personal view on a matter, because that's not conducive to what you're trying to portray to the outside universe. Because my view is my view. It could be completely different to the next other people that you would come across with. And yeah.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Well, guys, I hope you enjoy it. Sorry, Lucy, I'm making you sweat. It's only 4 minutes and 20 seconds. Okay. So, we are now going to a break. Lucy's coming back to the stage. I hope you guys enjoy. If you have any questions, grab us on the room. Thank you.
So, very quick one from me, because it is break time. You'll be very happy to hear it from me.
So, the next session is something that has actually come up, I think, a couple of times so far today, indirectly, which is kind of whose responsibility is it to make sure we're seen on screen, metaphorically speaking, because of course there's more than screen, and seen and heard and welcome in the workplace. Who actually does drive that? So, panel, please come on the stage. I will move out of the way so that we save time. Please come up and get ready. I'm sure I am preaching to the converted when we say that there are so many people in our organizations that perhaps could take responsibility for inclusion. But having said that, it's never always easy to get it right, do it well, do it authentically. And there are so many challenges that, you know, when we hear case histories that we face as advertising and marketing people along the way. So yeah, who does drive the inclusion agenda? Well, I'm thrilled to bring to the stage one of our commercial directors, Jerry Dakin, who will introduce himself in a moment. He has quite literally written the book on inclusive marketing. And I'm sure he will, yes. I'm sure if he hasn't got a QR code for his Amazon page, he will share it with you later. So, Jerry, please introduce your panel.
Thank you, Mark, for doing the plug for me so I don't have to. But yes, it's a really good topic. And I think when you think about what Outvertising is here to do, a massive part of what we're here to do is to support LGBTQ+ people working in the industry. But but as many of the panels have hinted at, we're also really here to advocate for like the impact we can have as brands, as marketers, as creatives in the world around us. And that's what we're here to talk about. And I think we're here to talk quite practically about that. I kind of hope we're in a room of people who believe that's a good thing and it's a good idea. We're not going to spend a lot of time. I think some of the previous speakers have made a really good case for why this is super important, super relevant. We're going to talk a bit more about how we do it. And yeah, ultimately, who in our kind of crazy ecosystem of things is responsible for that? And so we have a great panel. Myself, as well as being the advertising co-commercial director, I work at Beam Suntory. It's an alcohol company. We do also own Lucozade, which I learned earlier today is very popular with the community. So fantastic news for sales, I'm sure. We've got representing kind of more of like a creative side. We've got Natasha, Tash, who's at Tank Worldwide. We've got Caroline, who's representing more of a media owner side from Clear Channel. We've got Assad, who's representing a bit more of a kind of, can we say neutral, a sort of D&I specialist, third-party consultant. And we've got Isabel, who's also representing the brand side. And I might start with you, Izzy, and just say quite quickly, why is this topic so important to you? Why does representation matter? And why is this such a key discussion?
Yeah, so hello, everyone. Isabel Massey from Diageo. And I think I'm feeling quite big picture today. I was thinking about this question as I was walking over. I was strolling through the streets of London, quite fast to get here. I was like, God, for me, there's two things at the moment that really are on my mind day in, day out, and that's the economy, what's going on with the economy, and it's what's going on with the planet. And then when I think about the question about why does representation and inclusion matter, I'm like, God, if we do not get to great inclusive marketing, our economy is going down the toilet. Marketing is so important to our economy, and we really need to make sure we get to great marketing every single time, and it really matters at the moment. So inclusion in marketing, very important. And
quite a lot of weight on your shoulders there as you walk along the street. But
it's good to stroll it off. It's like I was strolling off, and the planet. I was like, God, it's the diversity in our teams. It's the people that bring that into our meetings day in, day out that are going to make sure that we're constantly driving that agenda. So I was like, yeah, this is big stuff. We got to get it right.
Love it. Asad, why is this topic so important to you?
Well, I was just reflecting on what you were saying, Izzy. We were at a talk many years ago, and someone from Extinction Rebellion walked in and said, you can forget about D&I because the planet's effed. And I remember thinking, wow, that's quite a big statement. Like the planet's going to burn and then we're going to go with it. So that's the scene setting for today.
I also remember you standing up and saying, I'm not sure I agree with you.
Yeah, well, I don't. And I think because it's the people. So why representation really matters, and I think why I set the business up that I run is I remember being in Westfield probably 2015-16, and I just looked around and went, no one here, and I think I told you this story, Jerry, no one here looks like me, and I was born and brought up in this country, and I thought if you can't see yourself in what you're looking around at, then you don't feel like you're meant to be there. And this is what people say time and time again, if you can't see, you can't be it, if you can't see the leadership team, etc., etc. So it matters because actually the country's in quite a murky place. We've now got a brown person who's the Prime Minister, and lots of people are saying, oh, that's great representation. Well, actually, for our community, possibly not. So it matters because it's complex. And I think you're asking almost the wrong question to a panel like this in a room like this, because we're all going to walk out and go, yeah, of course it is. But actually, I think people don't often know what things need to be representative of. And are things like that just quite skin deep?
Good challenge. With the panel's asking the wrong question, but we'll get to it in the back.
I'm sure we'll explore a lot of that during our session. So hello everyone. I'm Caroline Forbes from Clear Channel. And why does it matter to me? Why does D&I kind of matter to me? And much like the panel, I think this is a question that we've had to consider over the last, last 3-4 years. And I think it matters because when people feel like they matter, they show up differently. And I think when people show up differently, they bring their best selves to work. Their work kind of translates into something that is more meaningful and more authentic. And I think it's that diversity of thought that's really important. And actually, when you have that diversity in thought, to Isabel's point, actually, it creates an environment in which is more representative of the society that we live in. And I think as, you know, people that work in marketing and advertising, we have a duty to actually represent the people and our society that we live in. So, yeah, that's why it's important to me.
And Tash, last but by no means least, why does this matter so much to you?
I mean, I'm going to echo what everybody else on the panel has said, and I will also add a kind of more personal note in that, you know, my kind of reason to be in the world and in my job and in my career is to I believe that everybody has the right to sparkle and to really show up and be themselves. And I think in advertising, as Caroline was saying, we all have a responsibility to further that and to make sure that everybody has a voice and everybody is listened to. And so in order to do that, we need to have representation that's inclusive of the people that we are speaking to and listening to as well. So it's kind of selfish reasons, but also reasons for the world.
Love it. So I personally work in media, which means whilst we dabble in trying to be creative, we spend more of our time thinking about like frameworks and numbers and stuff. So to help drive this conversation, I thought, what better than a framework that we can use to structure our conversation and, to Asad's point, to make sure we walk away with here not just nodding and saying, hey, that was a good idea, but really practically thinking about what we could do differently. And rather than inventing one, we've borrowed one from the World Federation of Advertisers, a framework that a number of people in this room, Izzy and others, have helped shape over the last couple of years. Really took the fact that if you want to get to inclusive work, and if you want inclusive work to be part of your main marketing, not like, hey, I do an inclusive campaign over there occasionally to talk to different communities, but you want all your marketing to be more inclusive, you've really got to think about the whole marketing process. Every step of that process, there are opportunities to positively think about, to bring in different perspectives, to bring in inclusion, or unfortunately, more often than not, to accidentally, or maybe deliberately, but benefit of the doubt, accidentally forget people, lose people, run out of time, not have the opportunity, go straight to averages. And so we're going to talk a little bit through, and because a committee made this, there were 12 stages, which is slightly over-engineered. So we're going to simplify it down into just 4 and talk with these guys a little bit about what we can do at each stage and also whose responsibility it is. But Isabel, surely it's just the brand's responsibility. Surely you guys, you know, you're setting the briefs. You're at the very start of this process. When it comes to the briefs, the insights, everything, it comes from you guys. What is your role, and how do we start this journey in the right place?
Yeah, and clearly it's not just our responsibility. Good dramatic effect there, Jerry. But it does start with the client and the briefing. And so the first thing I'd say before I talk a little bit about how we approach that is that if you work with clients who you feel don't take responsibility in this space, this is where people like me and Jerry can step in, and the World Federation of Advertisers. We're here to make sure that we're having client-to-client conversations and really pushing this agenda. And I mean that seriously. Like, drop us a note on LinkedIn. If you feel like there's someone who we need to bring into that fold, we want to drive this for the industry. In terms of from a Diageo perspective, I think the briefing is so important, and we've done a load of work on it. And specifically within the briefing, I think it's the insight that plays the biggest role, really trying to work out what it is that we can crack. And I'll give you a recent example of this. Was for a brand that, how many of you know the brand J&B or Hotebe, which is a whiskey brand? It's huge in Spain. It's one of the largest in Spain. Anyone? Yes, thank you. Spanish contingents in the room in particular. And it's a brand that it's so important for us to make sure that we're doing marketing right because of the fact it has such a large market share. So it's a leader. And so for us, a good few years ago, we said, well, what would it take to be the most inclusive brand in Spain? What would that really, really take? And we did some good campaigns in this space, but we didn't really hone in on an insight. And then through collaboration with agencies in particular, we came across one that just felt so universal and interesting, which was that across Europe, only 13% of people within the LGBTQ plus community lived in rural areas because of the fact it didn't feel like a safe place where people could truly be themselves. And I'm seeing lots of nods in the room, and it's a really, really sad truth that I think resonates with a lot of people. And so we said, well, yeah, so it's all very well that we've got Pride happening in Madrid, but that doesn't influence the opinions of people living out in the rural areas and really change minds. So there was actually a term that we created about it, not exiles, sexile, sexilio, which meant that people literally had to move away from their rural areas to the city because of the fact they didn't feel comfortable. So we took Pride and we made a huge float, and we took that round to all the tiny little villages around Spain and celebrated Pride just as big. And it hit news, mainstream news. It got covered a lot. But the place I'm most proud of that it got covered was in the Spanish Parliament, where sexilio was talked about as a term, and that's just the start. But I think that gives you an example of how the briefing and the insight is so important, because we would never have done that before, never. And so I really encourage people to focus on that and getting to something powerful.
I love it. At the end of a campaign, you get one of those just ridiculous KPIs, like, spoken about in Parliament. It's quite a high bar to set. Asad, you sit alongside lots of different companies, helping them on this journey, helping them to do this. How, for companies who haven't been able to be more inclusive in insights, where do they start? How do they start bringing that in? Or maybe even for agencies that aren't getting inclusive briefs, what's your advice for them to challenge their clients to push for that?
So I think, Isabel, you talked about what's going on in the economy. So over the last 3 years, what we've seen is people have moved beyond the moral imperative for inclusion. It's a good thing to do. We should all be good people. Like, we've got past that. It's, okay, there's possibly a business case, but then you're hearing people say, well, I'm not a business case. Someone in the last script said, I'm not a resource. So you've got to move beyond that and say, well, why are we doing it? And the business challenges that people are stuck with is, how do I grow my business at a time where people could be spending less or having less income? Or how do I retain great people, attract great people into my business? And what often happens is people say, well, we need to be more diverse. And you go, well, what do you mean by diverse? And oftentimes people will say, diverse. And you say, okay, well, what do you mean by that? And we go forward, we do a lot of back and forth on that. And then eventually it'll be, well, we want to attract more black and brown people, or we want to increase accessibility in people who are in wheelchairs, and getting really specific about what we mean and who are we trying to either attract into our workforce and keep there or sell to. So actually that is a business case of who can we sell this whiskey to, and how can we get a halo effect around our brand? And I think it's getting really specific. When we go into brands, often, yes, they're a bit further ahead than agencies because they're closer to the business challenge of what they're trying to get to, and you'll know that, Jerry. But the reality is the conversation that then happens gets really stilted because it's really hard to talk about some of this stuff. So people find it really difficult to talk about racism. Fact. It's not easy to go into your workplace and say, should we just start to talk about systemic racism that's existed for hundreds of years because we actually want to do a better Facebook advert? Like, no, you've got to break down some of that and go, what do we mean? So that's a lot of what our business does, because we've got a framework called Inside Out Inclusion, and really looking at how do you move the cultural confidence levels below. So if you're saying, well, we want to be more diverse, we're saying, actually, we want to be selling more to gay men in rural Spain. That is a conversation that if a brand and agency can have together, they can create a better campaign. Whereas if they're all skirting around going, oh, I'm more diverse, then nothing really moves.
I love how both those answers move us beyond being generic. Because if you're just like, I want to be generically kind of more inclusive to everyone, it's tough to get anywhere. It's when you get those interesting insights, interesting stories, you actually move on. Speaking of moving on, the clock ticks down aggressively against us. So we're gonna jump on to the next phase. So you've got a brief, you've got some insights. Hopefully you've managed to land on some inclusive thoughts, or at least put out in your brief that you're open to and interested in them. And then comes the actual the ideation that you're pulling a team together, a creative team, whatever's needed to solve this. They're coming up with creative development. They're coming up with ideas. They may be even testing it. And then, so Tash, maybe I could jump to you. Surely it's all on the creative team's shoulders. You guys are coming up with the ideas. You guys are throwing the stuff in front of the client. If you're not putting inclusion in front of them, they're not going to buy it. How do you make sure inclusion is in that process? And I guess maybe if the client isn't asking for it or isn't as enthusiastic about it, how do you start moving them towards wanting it?
It's quite a big question.
There's a lot in there.
There's a lot in there. So for me, it always comes down to making sure that the creators of the ideas come from different lived experiences as well, because the more different that you can get the people in the room making decisions, the more that there's going to be a diversity of thought about, the different audiences, how we speak to different audiences. And so, we come up with different ideas, different ways, different perspectives of how to, sell to this particular audience or, speak to people in this particular channel. And it's really interesting because for me, in my story, I haven't always been in advertising. I had kind of a couple of different careers before that. And I started out working in kind of science editing, let's call it. And we worked next to shared an office with Grey. And so kind of years and years later, I've kind of come full circle, and I've always been involved with, diversity kind of organizations and championing, diversity of thought and everything. And it's really great now that I'm in a place, I'm at Tank, which is part of Grey, which is a fantastic place because all of our kind of leadership, well, most of our leadership, as to say, are either or all of queer, black and brown people of colour, different kinds of people, and to feel that kind of safety to not just to fail, but to the safety to actually speak out, and how you see how within the team that is just kind of amplified. So I think that the way to take a client on a journey towards that is to show the people, not just show the people, but show the thinking of the people, and to really get them to buy into the ideas and the passion that each of the people that are, creating those ideas have about whatever the idea is. So it's kind of a separate thing to diversity. It's more about channeling your diversity of thought, whether that's LGBTQ+ or race or culture, channeling that passion and then using that to sell the idea in, and then already you're kind of, subtly selling in D&I and take them on the journey,
100% agree. And I think that there's something incredibly powerful. And, in some ways you can get rid of this whole framework if you get those diverse perspectives and if you allow those perspectives to be heard and listened to. But that isn't always easy. Is it, Caroline? So I think, from whatever process we're working on, whether it's an agency side, whether it's media owner side, responding to briefs, etc., we know that having diverse talent gets us to better results, but we don't naturally have that. What more can we do as industry to encourage that talent, to get it into the industry, or to make sure it's listened to when we have it?
It's really difficult, and I think I'm speaking to a room that probably can kind of has got a lot of empathy and can sympathise with how difficult that is. Usually, and more often we're the only ones in the room, and I say I speak to you as the queer community, and I speak about myself as a black woman, and I can only kind of talk from the experience that I've had, and working in a company that is majority white, and championing issues around kind of race. And where you get that support from in terms of allyship is incredibly important. And I think in one of the last panels, there was a lot spoken about in terms of making sure that you've got senior sponsors, making sure that you've got senior people within the organisation that kind of support what you're doing. And I think that's incredibly important, because if you're not supported, your views won't be heard at board meetings. You won't have someone that advocates for you. You won't have somebody that kind of champions you when you have to be really brave to step out and do these things on your own, right? So when you do, having that support from kind of internal structures is really important. I think, the role that I've played at Clear Channel is, making sure that this becomes a lot more mainstream than it was. Lucy, who I've worked with for a very long time, we championed ERGs, which are now lovingly known as crews at Clear Channel. And, it's grown really organically at Clear Channel. And I think, whilst that was difficult, for me to get my head around at the beginning, I think it has been the right process, because what that's meant is, we've got 5-6 different crews, and we've got people running those crews, crew captains that have the lived experience, that can speak to the experience of, whatever's going on for them. And I think it's important. And so if you've got, people with the lived experience in your organisation that can come together in a safe space, that can drive change, I think that's important, with the support of leadership, and HR is fundamentally important to really drive strategic change, cultural change. Trying to do these things on your own is incredibly difficult.
Can I add something to that, Jerry? Because one of the things we're seeing around E, D, and I. So within E, so equity and equality, organisations aren't quite sure where they're at on that. Some organisations are sitting with equality and saying we're going to treat everybody equally. Some organisations are moving on to equity, which is a lot more about campaigning and social justice. I think people are doing really well on diversity because you can measure it. It's really easy to look at something and go, okay, well, we can see things. It's hard to get some of the data internally. But this bit about inclusion and actually how do people feel within organisations is really hard to measure. It's actually a model that we're developing at the moment to help our clients to look at how do you measure inclusion within a group. Because you could run an experiment on this group or any of the panels here and say, what was the share of voice within the group? Who said what, where, and how, and why? And that plays out in creative reviews. That plays out in client agency meetings. That plays out in the networking that happens, and that's the bit where people are going, how do we measure that and change that? And it's exactly what you're saying, Caroline. It's linked to societal outcomes. So I think sometimes we assume, well, we enter a room like this and it's all going to be vastly different to what goes on outside. It's not. The same power dynamics will play out. So we have to think about how to change that, and that's why the structure is really good to look at.
And I think that is really important in terms of internal dynamics. One of the things that came out in like the Advertising Association's All-In survey, which the WFA's scaled globally, was that although representation of quite a lot of minority groups is improving, for instance, black representation in the UK industry is improving, those people are much more likely to be thinking about leaving the industry, much more likely to be thinking that it's not a place for them. So it's not just about getting people through the door, it's about making them feel welcome.
I do, just to share an anecdote, like I remember a decade ago, and I know I'm not that, was I in the industry 10 years ago? Yeah. But I remember wow.
More laughs than you were hoping for.
But I remember a client saying to me, well, of course we wouldn't show two men in an advert because they don't shop here. Ooh. And I just remember going, what? And it was earlier on in my career, and that's about power. Can you speak back to a client in a way that could lose you an account? I think we've got, in 10 years, I don't think I would hear that today. So we should praise how far we've come to be campaigning like that. But
there was definite progress. Yeah. Just like we're progressing to the next stage. I'd love to say a shout out back to Clear Channel as well, because I think during lockdown, some of you may remember those years, and we had to do advertising live or advertising awards virtually. And shout out to Meta as well, who helped us through all that and have done a fantastic job of helping us today. But Clear Channel also, you kind of put your money where your mouth is and you use your media space to not just advertising, but I think POC and a whole group of other people as well. It was amazing, seeing some of the creative that people created under lockdown to promote inclusion just out there on the actual streets. So thank you.
Oh, thanks for that, Jerry. You don't want me to talk about that, do you?
No. But over coffee. We're going to move on to production. It's descending into chaos, and we haven't even got the Diageo bar open yet. Thank you to Diageo for supporting us through it all. Production, we're actually making this stuff, right? And I think some people jump to production as the solution. Some people jump to casting and putting a few different people in front of the camera as the solution. Obviously, we're talking about inclusive marketing being much, much bigger than that, starting with insights, starting with why we're doing some of this stuff. But Tasha, from a creative agency perspective, production is still a really important time if you want to be more inclusive, we've got to make that process more inclusive. What's your advice? How do we go about doing that?
I think it actually starts way before production, to be fair. It starts at that briefing process. It starts when you're starting to think about the different stories that you're trying to tell. And again, if you've got a room full of creators who are from different lived experiences, then those stories are going to be more authentic to what their experience is. And so when you then eventually get to your production, you've already set the groundwork for making sure that the people that you're casting or the characters that you're trying to show visually are true to the story that you've kind of written as part of the brief. So I think it's as long as you're thinking about it, it's not an afterthought. It's not the visuals on this look a bit white or too heteronormative or whatever. If you've thought about it from the beginning, if you've kind of had conversations with the client all along the way, it's not really a question, in my experience anyway, that needs to even be asked. It's that those characters are there, that
the groundwork to get there. Yeah.
Having said that as well, though, I think myself and my creative partner, who is a black man, because there's the two of us there kind of making the decisions, that we've got, the seat at the table or whatever, we are very conscious of the different kinds of people that we cast for when we're filming things. We want to make sure that there's representation behind the camera. So the whole production crew, really, there needs to be, it needs to be true to any of the stories that we're trying to tell. So I guess advice is start as early as possible. Don't wait till production to kind of get that D&I involved.
And I think there are small things on production. Actually, I think if the WFA guide that we're stealing with pride today has like some real practical things around, hair and makeup. Like, do you have people who are used to doing hair and makeup for people with different hair, different skin? Do you have like toilet facilities? Do you have prayer rooms or quiet spaces or things like that? There can be small things you need to think about.
Cameras are hella racist. They are. Cameras, they can be that.
There's a fantastic case study Google did with trying to make their cameras less racist and like actually trying to make them photograph different colour skin better, but we haven't got time for that. So, Asad, we come into this fantastic time where the work is almost finished. We're kind of, maybe we're in post-production, we're in localization if you're a global brand, we're trying to get markets to take this creative, and then occasionally clients say no, clients get nervous, clients get worried, they don't shop here, or it's not right for my market, or it's, how do we push past that kind of last caution?
Well, I think it's kind of what you said, Tasha. If it's not embedded from the beginning,
earlier,
then that's more likely to happen. Sometimes what we see happen is people are swapping out what we call Noah's Ark diversity. So they get to the point of production or casting. They're like, oh, well, we could just swap this group for this group and it'll be okay. And then you lose the insight to it. What we've also seen happen is sometimes there's a bit of a hunch that can appear. So we've been brought in by a drinks brand, for example, to look at an ad where someone said, actually, we think this could be quite offensive and we're not quite sure how and why. And then we've tested it and found that there was something in there. So sometimes that hunch does need to be followed up on. And that could be just because the length of time it's taken to do the production has meant the global news agenda's moved on, or it could be that actually there might have been moments throughout the process where it wasn't equitable and someone might have been saying, hang on a minute, have you thought about this or thought about that? And it's only until you see the final product you go, oh no, we've got to pull that. And we've done that a number of different times with brands because we're external as well. We don't have skin in the game in having developed it, where brands have gone, we've spent hundreds of thousands of pounds on something and we're not going to run it because it's not the right thing to do. So sometimes you have to listen to it, but actually what you've got to do to get it right is what Tash said, is get right back to the insight and not just treat it as an isolated moment in time.
Yeah, I think it's a good nudge because depending on your process, there are different processes, like before you create the stuff, after you create the stuff, where you're thinking about testing, thinking about does this work, and making sure that there are different voices in the room to review that, but also that they're able to speak up. Because it's no use showing that in a room where like there's some super senior person and the people who have a perspective feel they can't.
Yeah, and oftentimes the super senior person actually hasn't had the time to get their head around something. So where we consulted on the Tesco Ramadan campaign earlier this year, and the client actually wanted to say, I need to understand Ramadan in all of its context so I can make an informed decision. So it's actually going in and informing the client around, well, why does this matter to see, for example, a same-sex couple? And oftentimes what I see, and it could be contentious, is often in advertising, people are replacing heteronormative scenes with same-sex couples. And there's a question of, well, is that really how people want to be seen? Or are we just replacing one thing with another?
It's a good challenge. And one we don't have time to unpack. So... I don't think I was made to do this. But anyway, we're finally going live. We've got the work. We're ready to go. We're getting to the media part, which is the exciting part. Let's not forget.
Can we just go back to Asad? I was enjoying that.
No, Izzy, we're going to come to you, Izzy, because although I joked about media liking frameworks and things at the start, which we do, we also can be creative and do really interesting things. Actually, Diageo has been one of the advertisers that's been very outspoken about the power of our media to fund really good stuff, to support different voices, whether that's in the LGBT community or more broader, that, we don't always think of media as being about diversity and inclusion, but you guys have proven it can be. Can you talk us a bit about that?
Yeah, it came from the concept that we had a lot of control around who we put in our adverts, who made the adverts, so the teams around that. But actually then when they were showing up in media, the media, the publishers, the platforms weren't at that same level of diversity and inclusion. And we said, but we spend quite a lot of money, as do all the advertisers in this space. So we need to be more pushy around the environments that we're placing our ads. And that's where it started. And it grew and it grew and it grew in Diageo to the extent that myself, Hannah Mirza, who's sat there, we're having conversations with our teams about this being non-financial targets that we have for Diageo, and so we're really publicly talking about this. And I sat on a call recently that was for all marketers across the globe, and said to them, well, it's really great that we're on this huge mission where we're changing the media landscape and the diversity that we see in it, but just so you know, that there isn't enough media inventory out there at the moment that has diversity in it to hit our targets by 2030. And the phone kind of went dead. It's like, let me just repeat that. There is not enough media inventory out there for us to hit our targets. And so we have to create the opportunities. We have to have really hard conversations. We have to get other advertisers along with us. So an example of that some of you might have heard me talk about before, but it's one that I just think really sums it up, is that in Germany, in the TV landscape, we created we helped co-fund a show that's called Princess Charming that was about getting lesbian couples. It's the equivalent of the Bachelor or Bachelorette, but for lesbian couples. And it wouldn't have been produced if it didn't have advertiser funding. And so we helped fund it. We had Bailey's in it. And it became a huge success, an award-winning success. And then it went on to mainstream German TV as a result. So sometimes it's just being there at the right moment, putting the investment in to allow these things to grow. But we've got to do that hundreds of times to get to where we want to get to. So it's definitely a really, really important thing, because advertising itself isn't enough. We've got to fix the media landscape too.
And we need lots of other brands doing the same to bring it along. Awesome. Caroline, I think I'm going to throw to you for maybe our final word, partly because I didn't let you speak earlier, and I'm very sorry about that. But I stole some of your thunder by talking about some of the awesome things you've done. But the media owners are my favourite part, the whole ecosystem. What are you guys? What is the opportunity for media owners to push, to agitate, to challenge the industry, and to start creating more opportunities, like Isabel talks about?
Lots. Actually, I think, thinking for brands that are thinking about the channels in which they can reach more diverse audiences and kind of reach their kind of different communities, I think lends itself to thinking about, channels that you might not naturally think are that inclusive. And when we think about out of home, so we've been doing a lot of work in this space in terms of our medium, and the vehicle that it creates to reach inclusive audiences exclusively is brilliant, because we are a public medium. So a lot of the work that we're doing at the moment is talking to agencies and brands about kind of the use of their medium to reach everyone. And you can do that in a really targeted way, but you can also do that as a kind of a one-to-many a medium, and it works, right? Because you're not excluding anybody, and working alongside other media channels, I think really supports kind of that omni-channel approach in terms of how brands are thinking about reaching different audiences. So, for us, out of home should sit on lots of media plans. Of course, I would say that, but I think if you're talking about reaching lots of different types of people in the heart of their communities, where it's unintrusive, out of home does a really good job at doing that. And we're working alongside other media channels with the media agencies to help them navigate where we fit as part of the puzzle to do that effectively.
Brilliant. Well, thank you, guys. We started with a bit of a question, which was who drives inclusion? I think, spoiler alert, we possibly landed on the answer that we all have a responsibility and we can all do something. If we had more time, I was actually going to get them all to challenge each other, different parts of the ecosystem, what more we could do. But we've got cocktails in a bit, so maybe we can have a Royal Rumble at the end of the day. But yeah, thank you very much to the panelists. Thank you very much. I don't think we have time for questions, so speak out there.
Here we go. So, before we get to our next panel, we have a short and incredibly important interlude from someone that I had the real pleasure of meeting earlier this year at a Stonewall event. And I've been sat next to them all afternoon. Please welcome to the stage Valentino Vecchietti, the founder of Intersex Equality Rights UK. Grab that one.
This one? Does this work? Hi everyone. Some of you might have seen my intersex inclusive pride flag that I created in 2021 on Regent Street this year. I collaborated with Regent Street. It was amazing when they contacted me to ask if they could print 100 flags for Regent Street to celebrate the 50th anniversary of Pride. But what's really important for me today is to look at next year and the year after and the year after that, and to see how can I, as an intersex equality campaigner who largely works in culture, help all of you to create campaigns for Pride 2023 and onwards that are really intersex inclusive. I work in casting, I work in consultation. All of my work is about creating visual, cultural representation, inclusion, and doing it well, and doing it accurately, and doing it with the right language. And so you can imagine how really happy I am right now to be in a room with all of you and to hear these fantastic panels and to have been invited here today. But why does it matter? Why does it matter to have intersex inclusion? And why does it matter to have a visible I? Why do we need to have LGBTIQA+? And why do we need to change that language? So the intersex population is about 2% of the population. So in the UK, we're looking at about 1.2 to 1.3 million people. And globally, we're looking at about 132 or 133 million people. And if you think it really matters, and it does really matter, to have a visible T and keep the T visible, you can see that we're almost double the population, but we're very hidden by stigma because it's much less well known to include I. A lot of people don't even know what intersex is. And so I'm going to give you a really quick understanding in just a few minutes of what intersex is. No, I have not got any more slides. I was only given one. So keep it on the slide it's on. Let's because then I can talk about the flag. Okay, so everyone in this room has sex characteristics. You're all born with sex characteristics. It's your internal and external sex organs. There is natural diversity in your sex characteristics anyway. Everybody's genitals look a little bit different, don't they? And we all have slightly different puberties. However, when you're born with an intersex variation, as I was, there is much more diversity, and that's all it is. We just have very diverse sex characteristics, and there's a lot of us that have very different combinations of that. So there's over 40 different combinations. So you're talking about a broad population that is in no way homogenous, but what ties us together is the vast diversity in our sex characteristics. That is what it is. And if you look at the flag, why did I want to create inclusion on the flag? And we've talked about it here actually in panels about lockdown, about being silenced, about not having visibility, and about why we need to see representation. And it came about in 2021 at the end of May. We'd just been excluded from the 2021 census. It had come out, and although we'd talked about it, I'd engaged with the Office for National Statistics for a couple of years. In the end, they chose not to include sex characteristics. Although we were celebrating along with trans people that gender identity was included, sex characteristics wasn't. We're also not included in the 2010 Equality Act. So we aren't protected by hate crime. So interphobia, we have no protections for that. We have no legislation. And although Stonewall do a fantastic job for LGBT people, they don't include intersex people. So I needed to do something really bold back in 2021 to give us visibility, to give us a voice globally. And so I did, I added the intersex flag to the pride flag. And so if you think about the rainbow largely representing orientations and natural diversity in sexual orientation, the black and brown stripes, which Amber Hikes brought to us in 2017 to create intersectionality so that we felt seen and represented, those of us who are people of colour. Also, Monica Helm's trans flag. So that's natural diversity in gender identity. And so bringing in the intersex flag makes visibility of natural diversity in sex characteristics. But what you have is a framework, a human rights framework now, where most of you have heard of SOGI, natural diversity in sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression. All I'm doing is adding sex characteristics to make it a really inclusive human rights framework in our flag and in what the Equality Act is failing us to do. But what we can all do globally is we can all work together to create real representation for all of us who have diversity in these areas. And I think because we really are oppressed by the same prejudice in society. All of us, we know, all of us who have natural diversity experience oppression, experience erasure, and experience marginalization. Being able to feel visible, we've heard, I was thinking about all the different things I could say today, but everybody on the panels has said it so eloquently. We need to be seen, and you all need to help us be seen because it matters, and we know that it works. It works for all of us. So I don't need to persuade you of that, but what I do need to let you know is that I'm here. I'm already doing that work. I created in casting. I know I worked on the video that I've forgotten your name. Sorry, David showed. I worked on that video to make sure that there was intersex representation, intersex people were in that, and I also consulted to make sure that the poem had intersex inclusion on. So I'm already doing that work, but I'm often brought in very late in the day because people don't know that I'm around. But here I am, and we've got plenty of time to really make Pride 2023 reflect intersex inclusion. Do I have 1 minute 49 left? I'm rushing. I think what the one thing I'd love you, like a lot of things I'd like you to take away, most of all my email address from this meeting, but I just want to take away with when, how much does it matter to us? How many, when we're born with variations in our sex characteristics, one of the huge oppressions globally that happens to the intersex population, if you think about conversion therapy, which, we're not even on, there's no even, our intersex isn't even included in any level about thinking about banning conversion therapy. Because if we have visible diversity in our sex characteristics in this country and globally, medical interventions, non-consensual medical interventions happen to us where our parents are persuaded that they need to consent to surgeries to make us look less diverse. And we know that there's nothing new about that. We know that Alan Turing was chemically castrated because his sexual orientation was too diverse. It's nothing new that's happening to people in my community. Historically, it's always happened to those of us who have natural diversity. People who don't have it want to stop it. But so when I did this, I wondered, we've got so much shame and stigma in our community, and I really wondered what's going to happen. I didn't know it would go viral. I didn't know globally everybody would be so excited about it. I didn't know our communities would be so excited about it, and I didn't know allies all around the world would. And it was really remarkable. Families with intersex children sent me photographs of their kids with the flag. When Regent Street did this, they also put massive vinyls up on the street with the flag and with the kind of iterations and how the flag had developed over time. And intersex people came from all over the world to be photographed with that vinyl and sent me pictures. We need it so much. And the other thing allies have said to me in the LGBT community, but also just everyone around the world has contacted me and said, we wanted to include you, we wanted to be with you, but we didn't have a symbol. And it's that, it's, you know, creating this cultural symbol of inclusion. And now, doing that has been one of the most important pieces of activism in my life, and it's become part of history. But what I want us to take forward now is, let's make that I visible, LGBTIQA+. Let's do what the whole globe was together with us and wanted us to do, and let's reflect that here. So yeah, I'm not going to speak any longer because I feel like I've taken up too much time already, but I'd be delighted to talk with you all afterwards, and thank you so much for having me.
And now you know why I was so excited to have Valentino with us today. So, thank you so much. So our final panel of the day, we're going to be taking a look at the rising problem of hateful LGBTQ+ focused editorial in the media, and how brands can exert their influence to push back against it. So, here we have Marty, who will be hosting, and our lovely panellists. And I'm going to get out of the way.
Thank you, Lucy. You won't know this, but there's a clock here, and I need it to reset to keep me on time. Okay. Right. So yeah, thank you for listening. Before I start, I want to talk about the brand's role in tackling LGBTQ+ hate in the media. But before I do so, I just want to really thank Valentino for joining us today. And I do hope that when you're considering your campaigns, when it comes around to Pride next year, I want to see that intersex inclusive Pride flag over all of your campaigns. Thank you. So yes, what we want to do on this panel today is we want to have a meaningful discussion that inspires positive actions. We really want to explore this problem. It's a really knotty problem, and yeah, it really needs a lot of thoughtful discussion. We're going to do what we can in the 35 minutes that we've got. But firstly, in the words of Scylla, what's your name and where'd you come from? And I'm going to start with you, Michelle. 15 seconds for each of you. I'm going to be really hot on time.
15 seconds. Okay, hi, I'm Michelle Sarpong, and I work at the Seven Stars, and my current role is Head of Display, Audio and Out-of-Home Activation.
Thank you.
I like that.
Brilliant. Great, very fast. Richard.
Hi, I'm Richard Wilson. I'm the director and co-founder of Stop Funding Hate.
Oh, I have a clicker. Right, there we go. It's me that's causing delays. Here we go. That helps, but doesn't it? Okay. Ben.
Hi, I'm Benjamin Cohen. My pronouns are he, him. I'm the chief executive of Pink News, and Pink News exists to inform, inspire change, and empower people to be themselves.
That's very good. And Flory.
Hi everyone, I'm Flory. My pronouns are she, her. I'm the marketing director for Skin & Me. For those of you who don't know Skin & Me, we're a very new business. We're a startup that was founded 2.5 years ago. And our mission is to change the skincare industry and make sure that everybody has the right treatment to live their best skin in life. And I'll be representing the advertiser side today. We're a new brand. We really care about diversity, but sometimes we also get it a bit wrong. So I'm planning on being quite unfiltered and just give you the truth of what it is to be a brand these days and how we can be better together.
Thank you, Flory. And I suppose I should introduce myself. So I'm Marty. My pronouns are they, them. I'm a creative strategist and founder of Smarty Pants Consultancy. And I'm also the co-director of advocacy and activism at Outvertising. So yeah, thank you all for joining me today. I'm very happy that you've all decided to join me. It's a very carefully curated panel to get the whole kind of rich, diverse perspectives around this whole issue. So yeah, let's get started. So firstly, I want to kind of talk about the actual problem. So I'm going to spend a few minutes just talking about the problem. So as Nancy was talking about earlier, Nancy Kelly from Stonewall, there's a real problem just actually diving into trans specifically, the T of LGBTQ+. We can actually see that the rise, that green line, that rise in kind of trans-related stories, much of the negative, as Nancy was saying, has been incredibly steep over the last few years. You actually can see that when you exclude Pink News, who we can safely say are very positive about what they talk about when it comes to trans people, that's still 15,939 stories about trans people. That's over 1,000 trans hostile or neutral articles in one 30-day period, as Nancy was saying. So it's an incredible amount of coverage. And you've got publications like legacy media, like Telegraph, The Times, the Daily Mail, some of the most prolific. And actually, as Nancy was saying earlier, surprisingly you might think, but Guardian also, which it was interesting when Kendra was speaking earlier, that's actually the most read of the legacy media from our community. And maybe it might be surprising to some of you in the room that they aren't completely trans inclusive in the way that they approach it.
Definitely not trans.
Definitely not trans inclusive. I'm trying to be polite. But yeah, no.
Not in the UK, anyway.
Not in the UK.
Not in the US. Maybe.
Yeah, and then also, what we've seen as well, if this progresses, is that, as Nancy was saying as well, that positive public attitudes towards trans people have actually eroded in the last couple of years. It's actually just looking specifically at a disbelief in people's expressed gender identities. So people just not believing that trans people are who they say they are. That's diminished. And people believing that transgender women pose a risk to cis women, that belief has become stronger. And these are things that people are reading in our national news media. And then we can also see as well, I've got slightly different figures from Nancy, but I'm using the government statistics that were published in October. So just use their own figures against them, I expect. So 43% increase in sexuality hate crime and 56% increase in transgender hate crime. So, this isn't just stories. This has a real world impact on people's lives. Oh, I'm going to go back a second. So yeah, that sets up the problem really nicely. So firstly, I'd actually just like to come to Richard initially on this. How would you define hate in the media?
So, with all of those examples there, I mean, it's typically media content that targets a whole group based on their identity. So obviously the transphobic media content is a clear example of that. And an example specifically might be the Times ran a pretty notorious headline saying children sacrificed to appease the trans lobby. So it's framing trans people as a threat. This is kind of threatening lobby that's being super demanding, and it's harming children. So one of the ways that we sometimes hear people talking about it is defining a group of people as a problem or a burden or a threat. And that's very much the direction of so much of the media coverage. The other thing maybe to say is it's not just about the individual examples, it's about the cumulative impact of that drip, drip, drip every week, every few days of another negative message, because that's what then fuels the toxic public perception, which can then lead to these other harms, including the horrible rise in hate crime.
Yeah, sure. And Ben, I mean, you with Pink News, you report on this all the time. I'm constantly reading articles on Pink News about you reporting on the hate in the legacy media. Can you speak to some of the kind of the narratives that we're seeing?
Yeah, and thank you for using legacy media. It's a phrase that is a term that I like to use at the moment because that's the reality. These are just like the established legacy media. I don't think that they're fit for the future. I'm really pleased that Pink News reaches over 100 million people each month and around the world. And that really demonstrates to us that there is a massive audience, not for this type of content that we're talking about here, the anti-trans, anti-LGBTQ plus content that you'll see in the legacy media. Mostly, I really agree with what was just said. It's basically scaremongering, and it's frankly like misleading journalism. It's journalism that's designed to try and delegitimize organizations. I mean, businesses like Pink News, organizations, charities like Stonewall, like mermaids. There's sometimes legitimate questions that are contained within the journalism, but the framing of it, I don't consider to be particularly legitimate. It's designed to create anger, confusion, fear in the population. And you can see that with the changes to public attitudes. And those changes in public attitudes run contrary to the changes on LGB issues. So when it comes to like same-sex relationships, support for same-sex marriage, that's moving in a very different direction. And it was making me think back to, it's 10 years since I launched the Out for Marriage campaign for same-sex marriage. And at the time, a lot of these same papers, not the Times actually, the Times are very much on our side, but the Telegraph and the Mail were running sort of scare stories. But the difference was that a lot of the readership knew a gay couple or a same-sex couple, or they had a gay couple in their family. So they were talking, when you were seeing those scare stories, they were talking about people that they knew. When it comes to trans and non-binary people, I don't think from the wider population people necessarily know, well, they might not know someone's trans or non-binary for starters. And so what they're actually talking about is a feared other that they can't that it's just basically a creation of the newspapers. So when we talk about the papers talk about the trans lobby, I mean, if there is a trans lobby, I mean, it's not very powerful given that the government's abandoned reforms to the Gender Recognition Act that Theresa May promised at the Pink News Awards in 2017. That the government's rolling back on things. You're seeing both within the Labour Party and the Liberal Democrats, frankly, moving backwards on these things. It's only in Scotland with the undisclosed National Party that we're seeing progress. So if there is this super powerful trans lobby, where is it? But it hasn't succeeded. And actually that's because they're painting a false narrative to create fear.
Create fear. And why are they...
sell papers, frankly.
Yeah, so why are they... Coming to you, Richard, as well, why are they trying to create this fear? Like, what is it that's really driving this kind of hate, this rise in hate in the media?
Well, the sort of, I guess the elephant in the room there is hate sells. It shouldn't, but it's a fact of life that there's a business model. Hate is part of the business model. If you have a website and you're prepared to run carefully crafted, hateful clickbait, pumping out these toxic messages, it's harming our society, it's harming people in our society, but it is an effective way, unfortunately, of driving clicks to your website.
So it's also effective in the opposite direction, right? So where does all the Pink News web traffic come from? It's things countering that narrative. And so the weird thing is, it's the division that
the polarization, the engagement, But maybe the other thing to say is that this has proliferated in the last few years, kind of in tandem with the rise of online advertising. So without intending to, the advertising industry has influenced the media to go in this more polarizing direction. And that's why you need to then think about what do we change systemically to counter that.
Yeah. That makes sense. So, I mean, I've got this chart that I've just put up here. So, that 50% of news publisher revenue globally comes from advertising. So you can see that their revenue is what's driving, being able to capture this revenue, right? One of the things I'm interested in talking about, the obstacles to inclusion within the media planning and kind of the media planning and buying process. So I think it's really interesting to have Florrie here as a brand owner who can kind of decide where to direct that media spend, and also you, Michelle, working at an independent media agency, advising clients on where to be able to spend their money. So just would like you to talk a little bit about the dynamics when it comes to that process and how you can kind of better drive inclusion in that process. Florrie, I'm going to come to you first. What's your experience with that?
Yeah, so I think as a brand, we obviously would claim that we are inclusive, and I think within my company, hand on heart, I've got people who are usually passionate about inclusion, but sometimes I think we forget that we're so stuck into the driving the numbers that we just forget about what that actually means behind the scenes, about where the money is actually going. A good example would be for us, one of our key media is influencer marketing. It's quite a fascinating industry, actually, if you ever want to pay attention to it. It's a bit crazy the way this thing works. And I arrived in the company, and then I was kind of questioning the strategy. How do we do influencer marketing? And I was kind of given a very data-driven approach to influencer marketing. I was told, okay, we've got this spreadsheet. We look at these people. We look at these criteria, and we've done some analysis. And the people and then we select our influencers based on this spreadsheet. Click a button, ask questions, and then we get to the spreadsheet. And then I started looking at, okay, who are these people? And then I opened the feed about where we were in, and it was basically all kind of white blonde women. No offense to white blonde women, but it kind of looked like we were advertising with only the same types of people. And it wasn't because it was coming from a bad place. It was just that we hadn't really paid attention. We were kind of so focused on the outcome, on the numbers, that we kind of forgotten to look at what actually was kind of happening. And then when I was kind of looking at kind of this talk, and then I was kind of thinking about, okay, I was like, well, am I funding Hey? I was like, really, like, as an advertiser, really asking myself a question. I was like, am I really funding Hey? And I think, reality probably we are right now, not purposely, but we, again, focusing on numbers. We also have this kind of false sense of security with this concept of brand safety, which is like a key thing in our industry. When we do a brief to an agency, we're like, okay, I'm going to brief you. I want it to be brand safe. And then I'm turning to Michelle and I'm like, good luck. Just keep me brand safe. But the brand safety concept is quite flawed, actually, because it's all about what your brand appears against in terms of content. So if I
ask, is it brand safe to appear next to something which attacks a minority community?
But we might exclude that by saying, okay, I'm going to exclude certain keywords. So I don't know, like gun violence. I don't want to appear about anything talking about guns. But then if the Daily Mail runs an article about skincare, my brand might appear against it because it won't be considered as brand unsafe because the article is about skincare. So yeah, there's a lot, I think, in terms of like advertisers maybe not looking at themselves in the mirror as much that they should, and obviously we're trying to, but we're on a bit of a journey, I think. But if my brand was, we're quite a small company, we care a huge amount, and we sometimes get it wrong. I suspect that it's the case of so many advertisers, and that's why the money is going in the wrong places, really.
Sure, that makes sense.
I was going to say, just I agree with Florian, just building on the thing of like what we're guilty of and the obstacles in the kind of agencies that land is like we look at reach. We work on a lot of brand campaigns, so literally like reach, then we get a result and going, oh, we're reaching 96% of all adults. But are we really reaching the right people? So it's kind of the obstacle there is kind of looking at your kind of media plan and going, actually, we're reaching 96% of all adults, but actually, how many of the trans community are we reaching? How many of the queer community are we reaching? Like looking in at every intersect and actually looking and going, actually, are we reaching them? If not, actually look at Pink News. Let's look at other media channels that actually are targeting that specific audience. So I think it's down to us as well in terms of like not looking at the, we just want one target audience in terms of like, reach. Let's look at get under the bonnet and actually be honest with ourselves. And as Flori said, look in the mirror and go, actually, are we really reaching the right audience? And I guess as well from a media point of view, in terms of like planning and buying, sometimes we feel like we need to do like a massive partnership or like a big token, output, but sometimes it does just start small with looking at who you're funding, actually like looking at in terms of that brand safe, that's one thing to do, but actually why are we not looking at sentiment? Because as Flori said, like there could be an article on skincare, but really and truly they could be quite transphobic, but it's actually getting the actual suppliers, the media owners that actually really go and invest in technology and looking at like sentiment and all that. I think there's one that Reach do, which is Mantis, but actually forcing their hand to kind of look at these actual, tech that we've got there to actually see what the real sentiment is behind it and actually then removing those ads. Because I only once we do that in terms of money talks, we've touched upon it before, if the money's there, if the reach is there, money will go there naturally, and that's through programmatic buys or wherever it might be. But as soon as that money's removed, trust me, they'll start making changes. I think for the first time, because there's been no consequences from some of the kind of articles and editorials that's put out, that's why people will continue. That's why, hate is on the rise. But I think for the first time ever, with Twitter, what's going on there, we're starting to really see like actual agencies, brands, like really taking a stand and pull money out. I'll be interested to see like, you know, what happens post that. I think that started with the whole Molly Russell case as well. But this is the first time I'm starting to see like, you know, brands really taking a stand and actually making that change. And who knows? I mean, Elon Musk, I mean, what a guy. But I mean, like, who knows if that will change, it will change anything like right now. But the fact that people are actually putting their money where their mouth is and going, actually, I'm going to just outwardly remove advertising from that platform, it will drive change.
Cool. Richard, I want to just bring us on that point then. Just talk a little bit about, I think, you know, your campaign with the Daily Express. I'm really interested in what happened there. And then we've got a short 1-minute video which just shows the impact that you had.
So that, yeah, our experience, so we started off as a small group of volunteers in a Facebook group. We've now got over 200,000 followers on Facebook. But the power of it is just people saying, please stop funding hate, this affects me personally. And advertisers have responded. And in the last 5 years, we've seen this kind of cultural change within advertising to the point where things have got to with Twitter. But along the way, I think there's an example here where the Daily Mail in 2018 did this horrible attack on the British Olympic hero, Tom Daley, that was really outraged a lot of people for the kind of homophobic overtones. And the advertisers stampeded away, including brands like Centre Parks and the South Bank Centre, who aren't necessarily seen as super radical, but they just didn't want to be next to this stuff. We've also seen advertisers leave the Daily Express to the point where a new editor came in and took a very different tone. And I'll stop there. You can play the video.
I'm hoping this video works. Is there a video? Yes.
What's been your biggest success, do you think, in terms of change?
We were on the kind of Stop Funding Hate list. And, you know, I was conscious of that from kind of early days. And
because of Islamophobia?
Yeah, that kind of troubled me greatly. Because, you know, stop funding hate, I mean, the mere words don't resonate well with anybody. And they published a report actually not long into my tenure that kind of said, look, they noted the Express had changed, and that was really important to me. You know, last night I appeared at the House of Commons and spoke. It was the Muslim Council of Britain who've just published a report on Islamophobia in the press, and Baroness Varsi got up and praised the Express for the changes that we've made. And you know what? If it's the only thing I've ever done in my career, you know, fine, I'll stick at that.
Great. I mean, it works, right? Yeah, I mean, well done on that, Richard. I mean, you must have been very proud to have been involved in that.
It's just amazing. I mean, the thing about this campaign is it's had far more of an impact than we ever thought it would. But I think the reason for that is that most people in this country and in society don't like the hate, and that whether it's people who work in advertising, whether it's ordinary consumers, and just loads of people have got out behind it. And once people could see that this started to work, this was working, a lot of people maybe who'd felt a bit powerless before really got behind it, and that was really what made the difference.
Yeah. I mean, it's really impressive. And I think one of the things when we spoke before as well, I was thinking a lot about what you said about good cop and bad cop. And I talk about it in terms of like carrot and stick. And Ben, I just want to, I mean, we've been talking a lot about, you know, stop funding hate, right? But like, can we start funding love?
Yeah, well, I think it's about funding the future. So I'll give you a couple of like thoughts. So Pink News has, as I said, 100 million users, 100+ million users each month. Our largest cohort of our users are on Snapchat, where we have 30 different shows. The Express isn't on there, but the Mail is, the Telegraph is. We're one of the biggest publishers on there. What's very interesting is the Daily Mail and the Telegraph on Snapchat doesn't carry this sort of particularly the transphobic, anti-LGBT content, because it just wouldn't work. They know how they're talking to an audience, and it's all about numbers, right? And so that the audience will just drop away. The other thing that's been very interesting for us on Snap is there we have huge reach, right? We're in the top. We normally have the top number 1, number 2 publisher on there in the UK, much bigger than like Telegraph and things like that, Sun or whatever. But so we get a lot of business as usual advertising on there. It's mostly sold through programmatic. We serve billions of ads impressions each month. However, we haven't yet been able to convince brands and agencies to do business as usual advertising with us on the web or on our other social platforms. So for them, it's only if you're going to do a LGBT messaging. Linda, our head of brand agency partnership, will tell you, he's somewhere in the back waving her hand, that contact her during like the run up to Pride Month. It's insane. Everyone's contacting. And then those people go away because they think gay people, LGBTQ plus people only exist during 1 month of the
Christmas,
year.
right?
Yeah, well, Christmas and maybe next year for like Eurovision, but it's those very specific moments, but we don't exist. Like, I'll give you an example. A large bank represented by a large agency contacted me during the first COVID lockdowns to say, Pride is cancelled this year, so we've decided not to do any LGBTQ plus advertising. So I was like, firstly, it's not cancelled. The physical march isn't happening. We were running a digital-only event. Pride is a concept. It's not just a month. LGBTQ plus people exist all year round. I have to say, I basically gave them a big lesson by email, and then they didn't reply. But I don't think they liked that lesson. But I contacted the brand directly to say we're basically being messed around by the agency, and the brand has been working with us directly instead. But that same agency, when there was Pride running, when we started to run, they did a big takeover for Pride period on the web. Their block list contained every word relating to Pride because they were like, well, you know, our block list includes LGBT things because there's like transphobic and homophobic hate in the media, but it was so like there was no nuance there. And so it didn't really work. So I kind of think there's a lot of lessons that it's really easy for agencies to say, and brands, we really care about like diversity, equity, and inclusion. Here's like a £5,000 campaign. Great. You know, we serve, as I said, billions of ad impressions. That 5,000 is not going to, I mean, I'll take it, but it's not going to get you very far. Yeah. But you know, start spending money properly, start spending money as usual. It needs to be business as usual. It can't just be little piecemeal campaigns. And actually, because those piecemeal campaigns are actually hard for the agency and the brand to deliver, conceptualize, and for the media to send. If you're just doing an advert for, you know, what's on sale for like pre-Christmas in a supermarket, well, I'll give you a big surprise. LGBTQ people buy food. So you can also show that advert.
I think that's a, I mean, we're reaching the end of our time, but that's a really great point to end on, that, you know, business as usual. You know, queer people exist all year round, and even on times where maybe Pride is not taking place in a physical way. Thank you so much. We could talk about this for hours. I mean, I personally could. But thank you so much for everybody who's joined me on the panel today. I know we didn't get to talk about everything.
Enjoy. Pink News is sponsoring some drinks later, so have a Pink News cocktail and stuff like that.
You're going to want to come to this after event. We've been working very hard on it, and yes, there's an amazing drag act that I really want you all to come and see. So please do that. I just want to kind of end. We're not going to have time for questions, unfortunately. I know you're all begging to ask them, but I'm sorry about that. But I just want to end on one note. Let me progress this question slide that you're not going to get a chance to do. Talk to us, essentially. So, I mean, I founded the advocacy and activism work stream within advertising earlier this year because I wanted to formalize a space for advertising to tackle hard questions like this one that we've discussed today. You know, we want this panel to be a start of a discussion. It's not just a nice chat on the stage today. It's actually a hard chat, but it needs to be the start of action. It can't just be conversation. And so what I'm asking is, if you have ideas, influence, or both when it comes to this topic in particular, and you want to see change too, then we want to speak to you at the end of this session. These are my co-directors. You've got Ant there, and you've got James, and we're all in the room with you today. So what I would ask you to do is just come and approach us. We're very friendly. We don't bite. Ant sometimes, but no, please. Yes. So please come talk to us or drop us an email. I'll leave this up so you can screenshot it because you're obviously going to want to email us. Thank you very much. Thank you for my panelists again.
so.
Yeah, I think the line I'm going to steal, Marty, is let's start funding love. Yeah. One of my thoughts for the day. And talking of which, we're on to the last session. Sorry, we're in the home straight.
It's like just having a chat about... yeah, so we are. We're in the last session. I think we mentioned it earlier. We're going to be joined by the eminentable Annette King. So
some of you may know the name Annette King. You'll perhaps know Annette as the CEO of Publicis Group UK, and recently she became chair of the Ad Association. What you might not know is that Annette has been a fierce advocate and ally for our community throughout her career. Thank you, Annette. We'll talk about that in a moment. And just as some examples, before Annette worked at Publicis, she worked at Ogilvy, and it was at Ogilvy that she was part of the team that launched Ogilvy Pride back in 2014, along with Andrew Barrett. I don't know whether Andrew's here from Ogilvy PR. And under Annette's guidance, Ogilvy became the first UK communications agency to become a global Stonewall diversity champion. And it was also Stonewall's first global agency partner and integrated Stonewall's offering into a number of Ogilvy's client accounts. Annette has continued her advocacy for employee network groups during her tenure at Publicis, for example with Egalite, who we heard from earlier, as well as 5 other employee networks across different inclusion areas. And Publicis Group UK became a Stonewall Global Diversity Champion in 2021. There's a pattern here. Wherever Annette goes, you have to become a Stonewall Global Diversity Champion. And she continues to focus on the LGBTQ plus community at Publicis so that we can thrive. Please join me in welcoming Annette to the stage.
Hello, everyone. I'm Annette, she, her. Very nice to be here. Thank you very much for having me.
hi, it's really nice to meet you.
You too. I like your outfit.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Again.
Is it itchy?
Actually, it's lined.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, not too bad. It's very hot. So might take my jacket off in a bit. So I think an amazing kind of history of allyship there. So why don't we open with this question here around why being an LGBTQ plus ally is important to you?
Well, it's important to me as a human being who has I have people in my life, in my personal life, in my family, my friends, who I want to be an ally to. But actually, it's if not more important that I use my position as the CEO of Publicis Group UK to be an ally. There are 6,000 employees in our company in this country across 25 different companies, different agencies, and I'm the CEO of that. And so it's my responsibility. I have the opportunity and the responsibility to personally be an ally across that business, but to also try to create an environment and a working culture that makes it very clear that it would be great if we could all be allies, and that provides ways for people to learn and understand how to do that.
Do you know what? I said this earlier, that I wonder if we sometimes create a very, very alive atmosphere when the room is full of queer people. It can be a bit intimidating to be one of our straight allies. I mean, what do you think for you being an ally is then? What's it all about?
So I think it's about standing up for what's right as much as you can. It's about listening and learning from people who've had lived experiences that I haven't had. It's about being, I've learned the word fragility in this context. It's about not being fragile and being comfortable with hearing stuff that you perhaps don't want to hear or you find upsetting to hear, but making yourself comfortable with hearing it and understanding it and trying to do something about it, which then leads on to the thing which perhaps I can do more in my capacity as the CEO, which is actually take action and try to do something about it. Publicis Group has a very helpful mantra that has been in place for many years, which is Vive la Difference, which means celebrate difference. So it is very helpful to have that as the overall kind of overall agency kind of rallying cry, because it gives some credibility to when you say that you want to celebrate difference, and that you want there to be actions taken to try to address the issues.
I love Vive la Difference.
You can have it.
It's great.
We just put stuff up in our Chancery Lane office all across the window, so it literally screams it from the windows.
It's brilliant. I mean, yeah, I know that I'd be very happy to rock up somewhere that has Vive la Difference as the...
And let's not underestimate what, as a gay man, if I walked in the office every morning and I saw that on the door of my office, it's like, I belong here.
Yeah.
And don't underestimate how powerful that is. I promise you. It is very powerful. So thank you for doing that.
So, what do you think the value of staff networks? I've been taught this today that we are not allowed to call them ERGs.
They've been officially renamed forever. For the
rest. So what do you think the value of staff networks for organisations, specifically publicists?
I'm going to be a little bit contentious in a minute and give them a different name, but I'll come back to that.
Great.
I think that they are invaluable. And as you said, we've got 5 of them at Publicis Group. 2 of them have been around for quite some time. Egalite, I think you all heard from Claire on stage earlier. Been around for a long time, but I hope that people that work for Publicis Group would agree that we've done more with it over the last 4 or 5 years. We've invested time and effort and money into it. And then we've got Viva Women, which has also been around, which is about gender equality for a long time. Again, we've invested more in it. And then the other 3 are, one is Embrace, which is for race equality, which we set up probably 2.5, 3 years ago, which has been invaluable over the recent years in terms of helping us understand, helping us learn, helping us know what actions we can take. We have another one called Enable, which is for disabled people, which is probably the smallest of the 3, but no less of the 5, sorry, but no less important. And then last week we set one up called Divergent Minds, which is for the neurodiverse population, which is 1 in 10 of us. So we keep going, and if there's more that we need to do, then we'll do more. But back to Egalite, I know Claire will have told you all sorts of things that they've done this year and in previous years, but they work very hard to make sure that everybody in the company understands what's going on out there, what events we can support, what communities we can get involved in. They've done all sorts of things with Trans Pride, London Trans Pride, and they worked with Embrace to support UK Black Pride. So they're out there helping us to be involved in more than just the maybe the more obvious things, and they keep us, they keep our knowledge levels up around LGBTQ plus history, stuff that's going on, and they keep us kind of connected.
And we really must not underestimate their power, which is what I was chatting about in the break. I think, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Publicis was the first in our community to have a transitioning policy.
I think so. I'd have to ask my...
Somebody can contradict me if you like, at your peril.
We've definitely got one. I don't know if we were the first or not, but yeah. And if others copy, then that's
incredibly
great, right?
powerful.
Yeah.
We had a panel earlier that was talking about driving inclusion, and we saw it from lots of points of view. But I'd now like to ask the point of view of an agency head. Who do you think is responsible for driving inclusion? You can imagine across here, is it the client? Is it the agency? Where do you think the buck ends?
Well, it has to be all of us. I mean, that's a pretty glib answer, but it really does have to be all of us. But I think from an agency perspective, it's about helping our people to embrace inclusion and help drive it. But also we do have an influence on our clients. We can't tell clients what to do, but we can give them very strong advice and informed help around what to do. So I think at the end of the day, the buck stops with every individual. But as an agency leader, I think the buck stops with me at the end of the day. But as it does for everything, and that's okay. But it's my responsibility to help other people own that need to be inclusive.
And do you find it tough sometimes when you're balancing what are clearly commercial responsibilities, client egos, and all that kind of stuff to continue to drive the inclusion agenda? I think it's getting easier because the agenda is getting more well known, and I'm more informed, and my people are more informed. We've learned, we keep learning, we keep listening. There's loads more to learn. But I think, as somebody said on the panel just that, most people want to make things better. Most people want to help.
the small group of awful people who don't. You know, we can overpower them if we do this together.
So, what do you think brands' roles are in tackling hate, as we just heard about in that previous panel?
I mean, we have a huge responsibility to do what we can. The reach and impact of what we do as advertising, the advertising industry is enormous. You were talking about media just then, but there's also the creative side of things, the actual messaging and the comms that we put out there and where we put them. So I think that, you know, we have to take on that responsibility and do as much as we can. And again, we can't tell clients what to do, but they do pay us to give them advice and to give them wise counsel. So as long as we know enough about what we're talking about and we're well enough informed, then I think we can take on some of that responsibility. And also I think the thing is, you know, if our clients can just get their heads around the fact that actually consumers who see brands being inclusive are more likely to like that brand in general, right, in terms of the overall scale. So I'd hope that they would do it for the right reasons, but even if they do it because it makes them more popular, then, you know, that's an easy message to give to a client.
You've reminded me, when I'm on one of my soap boxes, I say that we're privileged to do the jobs that we do, and that we have the power of creativity at our fingertips. And what we have many Slack networks. If you're not part of our Slack networks, dive in. They'll be up on the screen later. And one of the most popular Slack networks is the one that shares the work. And it's always up for discussion because, you know, it's difficult to please all of the people all of the time. But from your standpoint as an agency head, are there brands that you think are getting inclusion right?
I think.
And by all means, draw on some of the work from your own.
Yeah,
group.
are we going to play the work?
Yeah, we'll show some. We might have rehearsed this. Where would you like to start? Go on.
I mean. Yeah, are we going to play the work, or shall I talk about it a bit first? I'll talk about it a bit first.
Go on, yeah, go on.
So I'm going to show you 3 pieces of work. So I think many brands are getting it wrong, right? Many brands are not doing anything. Some brands are doing tokenist stuff. Some turn up for Pride and then disappear for the rest of the year. There's lots that needs to be done, and we will do all we can, but there is still a lot to be done. What we've got here are just 3 examples of work. 2 are from my company, and 1 is from another. I forced myself not to bring 3 of my pieces of work. And they're just, you know, they're just really good examples, I think, of brands who are getting it right. And they're 3 ads. So we need more than 3 ads, or more than 1 ad per brand to make the real difference. But they're all brave pieces of work. And so I think they're worthy of being shared with you this afternoon. And the first one, shall I talk about the first one and then we'll show it and I'll talk about the second? So the first one is for Renault Clio, the car brand. As I look around the room, I'm not sure that many of you, apart from Mark, are old enough to remember
the Clio.
Famous Clio ads of the 1990s, which went on and on and on. They went on for a long time. It was a wonderful platform, and it was about a relationship between a father and his daughter, so Papa Nicole. And these ads went for years and years and years. And
they were
super
classic.
Successful.
Yeah.
So what this agency, it's Publicis Polk, what they did with this Clio ad from a couple of years ago is they wanted to kind of go back to that kind of looking at a relationship through the car, but to make it contemporary and to address one angle of LGBTQ+. Come on, Poppet.
Today is gonna be the day that they're gonna throw it back to you. By now, you should have somehow realized what you gotta do. I don't believe that anybody feels the way I do about you now. Backbeat, the word is on the street that the fire in your heart is out. I'm sure you've heard it all before, but you never really had a doubt. I don't believe that anybody feels the way I do about you now. Today was gonna be the day, but they'll never throw it back to you. Said maybe you're gonna be the one that saves me. And after all, you're my wonderwall.
So,
Seeing some actual tears in the house.
at the tech run-through this morning, Nancy Kelly, CEO of Stonewall, was here, and she quite spontaneously said, "Oh, I remember that ad, and I remember sitting at home with everybody and going, oh my God, they see me."
Oh, that's lovely.
And I think, you know, we forget how powerful our work can be. And I just want to say that, and I don't know what the backstory to this campaign is, but so I've worked on automotive advertising all my life, which I thought was ironic, a gay man working in automotive advertising. Anyway, what do I know about cars? I learned. Is that for a massive milestone in this brand's history, they chose to celebrate our community. So amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't the easiest
selling.
But the client was, you know, informed and brave and went with it.
Yeah.
Right.
And when we've got work like that out there, which is, you know, fantastic on so many levels.
Yeah.
You and I debate that ad a lot, don't we?
Yeah, so Mark and I do a session, if you're interested, in a short history of queer advertising.
That's what it's called.
And this is one of the ads that we discuss. And as a bi woman, I do raise the question about whether one of the characters is indeed lesbian or maybe she's bi, which I think I've heard some creatives associated with it completely shut down. Which is fine. But the question does remain for me. And so I think that it's an interesting thing to feel all at once included. And we can sit here and talk about bi-erasure, or at least I could, for a fair amount of time. But equally have a question about whether you are being included. So I think it's like it's a piece of work that will sit with me forever because it is so resonant, so amazing, so emotive. But I think as we learn and as we move, there is also a question around how we can shine inclusion of all the corners of the LGBTQ plus community in what we do. Yeah, so that's amusing. Not amusing, amusing from me.
You wanted to show another couple of ads, didn't you?
Yes, so the next one is by Saatchi & Saatchi, and it's for EE. We've worked together over the last couple of years to launch the Hope United campaign, or platform really, which has been a great success. And we started with race equality in football, did a lot of work there, and then we moved on to sexist hate for the Women's Euros. And in women's football, this is something I learned, in women's football, sexist hate turns into homophobic hate very quickly. And so what we did, we put together a mixed gender squad of famous people, famous players that you'll see. And they made a stand. And you'll see Demi Stokes in the film with her wife. She had the baby, they'd had the baby 10 days before, literally. So it's a really important platform. So that's what we're doing now, and we've got other things in the hopper for what we can do with this platform to, Hope United, which is, to stamp out hate of all kinds in football, and of which there's many different flavours.
This could be a problem.
This could be a problem.
What?
Could be a problem for Lauren James. As their squad grows even stronger, the competition for places heats up.
That's definitely a problem. Could be a problem.
Women beat problems every day. But sexist hate, it's not her problem. It's ours.
See you later. See you later.
Love it.
It's really powerful work, and as you can see, it really is a platform that we can do a lot more with. It's not just one ad that has its moment.
Look forward to seeing the next exciting instalment of that.
Something on the table right now that you might see very soon. Yes,
Okay.
we shall see.
Exciting.
we need the client to be brave.
Yeah, okay.
And then the third and last one is a Starbucks ad, which I'm sure many of you have seen. It was done in partnership with the trans charity Mermaid, and it won the Channel 4 Diversity Award, quite rightly. And it really is this simple thing around when you go to Starbucks, they write your name on the cup, and then at the end, when they give you the drink, they shout your name out. And that little thing, and how big a thing that can be to certain people. And I should give credit to Iris, the agency, because it was their work, and it's just great.
Gemma Miller.
Gemma Miller, please come to room 4.
Hello?
Hello, am I talking to Gemma?
Hey, Dad.
Hey. Carol, you remember my Gemma?
Gemma?
And what's your name?
It's James.
James?
Yeah, it gets me.
Now, I was on the judging panel that particular year, and we actually, I don't know whether you know what goes on behind the scenes at the Channel 4 competition, but it's not easy to win that competition, So we have the CMOs or the CEOs of the brands presenting and their agency partners, and we kind of go, yeah, but you've got loads of money. You don't need any money from Channel 4. We had, I won't name the brands that went to pitch, and so it's a very worthy winner. But I also don't know whether you know that there was supposed to be a much bigger campaign They talked about using Starbucks premises as safe spaces. You remember we had this thing called COVID that kind of stopped it all, but it was supposed to be a much, much bigger campaign. And that's what I love when we're not just queer for Christmas, as we've been saying, we're queer all the time. And what was clever about that particular campaign was the longevity that they had kind of baked into it at the time. And as you said, it comes from a beautifully true insight that Starbucks is a safe place where your name is your name.
Yep.
Beautiful.
Yeah, lovely work. I wish we'd done it.
Yeah. Well, moving on from that amazing work that I'm sure we all kind of resonate with and love, let's talk about people getting it wrong. There are people getting it wrong. Do you have any thoughts? Do you have any?
Yeah, it's not really my place to sit here and
No,
talk about
of course
specific
not, but
ones who are getting it wrong. But I think
how to do it right. I don't know.
Lots of brands are getting it wrong, and like I said, either not doing anything or doing tokenistic stuff or doing something for pride and then nothing. I mean, it's better that they do something for pride than nothing, but it's still, they're not getting it. And I think the important thing is, it's kind of, like I said earlier, consumers generally will respond better to brands who are inclusive. And so it's a business risk if these brands don't get their heads around what they need to do. And the flip side of that is that it's a business opportunity if they do get their heads around what they need to do. So that's very much how we talk to our clients about it. Not you want them to do it because it's the right thing to do, but if to get them to take the first step, you talk to them about the opportunity for their brand and therefore their business. If that gets them started, then great, right? I mean, and then once they start to learn, then hopefully they will do it because it's the right thing to do.
I mentioned in the intro that you're chair of the Ad Association. Congratulations. I have to say I did a little cheer when I heard that you'd taken over, having somebody like you leading us. And the Ad Association is doing what it can. We, I don't know whether you know, but we collaborate with them. We kind of lead their LGBTQ plus kind of working group. But you tell us, as our leader of the Ad Association, in terms of, there's a lot of research came out of the All-In survey that I hope you all did at the time. It's going to come round again, so make sure you fill it in for All-In number 2. Tell us what the Ad Association is doing.
Yeah, so I would just reiterate, please do fill it in, because it doesn't take long, but we'll be as the actions that we'll be able to take will be as good as the data that we've got from the people that can give us it. So please do. The biggest thing, actually, Kate Williams, our head of D&I, who's here, wonderful Kate, explained to me that the biggest thing that they want us to do is a little big thing. So the biggest thing that the survey is telling us we should do we should collectively do as a next step is use our pronouns. And the reason that's a little big thing is because it's a little. I just did it on the stage. I've done it on my. It's a little thing for everybody to do, but if we all do it, then it becomes a much bigger thing.
It's a big thing.
And also, what Kate explained to me, and again, this is I'm learning every day about how I can be better at this. Is that me saying she, her is fine. It's me introducing myself, but what it's also doing is inviting other people to tell me what their pronouns are, and that's actually the important. That's the important piece. Yeah. That's why me saying it is helpful. I've been asked to say that, just to make clear that it's voluntary. We're not telling everyone they have to use their pronouns, so no one has to.
No.
But it's a little big thing, so why wouldn't everybody start to do it? And that really is that's what's coming out of Census 1.
Yeah, just to add a little bit to that. So we've done a fair amount of work around this as well, and the voluntary piece is really important. Yeah. Obviously, because some people maybe are in the process of transitioning, or they
can be triggering. And
can be triggering, or so you're right. We fully support and encourage everyone to use their pronouns if they're comfortable, and it is that little big thing, like you say.
Yeah.
And if you do want to go further, go to the Outvertising website, and we've written what we think are pretty robust measures that any employer should be doing to be very queer inclusive. They're at outvertising.org. But yeah, the pronouns thing, there's an ad association kind of webinar tomorrow, if you look up, which is all about helping you. If your organization hasn't quite yet encouraged everybody to adopt pronoun usage in the workplace, there's a webinar that your colleagues are organizing tomorrow that you can join. I think it's first thing tomorrow morning, about 9 o'clock.
Great. Well, I think we have one more question. Is that right?
Yep.
For you. So something that we noticed a lot in pandemic times, it really came to the forefront for a lot of our community. We know that mental health issues are a concern for everyone across the industry, but rates are higher with those that identify as LGBTQ+. What's your response to that?
Well, I mean, the whole, mental health, many people suffer with mental health. But you're right, the census data tells us that for the LGBTQ+ community, 28% of people reported that they either had or had mental health conditions. And that was against a baseline average of 12%. So that's more than double. It's 233% more than the baseline. And that's just not okay, clearly. But once you've got the first step is to get the data to understand the size of the problem. It's clearly a very, very large problem, and we need to tackle it. I don't know exactly how we do that, but we do need to tackle it. I know that I just saw the last panel and the rise in hate crime around for trans people as well. It's just all, we have to come up with ways of dealing with it. I don't have the answers, unfortunately, but knowing where you're starting from, I think is a good place to be. But those numbers are just unacceptable.
Yeah, agreed.
We have overrun, I'm sorry, but Annette, I'm not apologising for it. It's been fascinating listening to you. And again, it's such a privilege to have one of our agency leaders on the stage, because it's been a great day in terms of we've had one of our community leaders on the stage and an agency leader to end the day. So thank you.
My pleasure.
Lisa, thank you to Annette for joining us
so much
today.
Great. Okay, so summary of the day. What a day it's been. Thank you all so much for coming, staying, and contributing. And yeah, what an incredible...
I'll tell you what I'll take away, and I'm sure you will one of them. Nancy, we are not done. So Adland's annual queer gathering, I'm sure we'll be back next year. It's up to you. You may make it happen because we are not done. Lesbians love Iron Brew. And if there's nobody in the room from Iron Brew, go and pitch for Iron Brew, and that is your starter for 10. I was blown away by what LGBTQ+ networks in our creative agencies are achieving. Well done. And go to your HR department and demand more funding because you're doing a great job. Obviously, we talked about the importance of allies, the fact that we all drive inclusion, and as I said at the beginning of this session, start funding love.
I mean, I don't need to say anything else, do I? Although I will say one thing, thank you to our sponsors, and come to Outvertising late, where you will be enjoying Pink News' hospitality, and there is a Pink News cocktail called the Pink Muse. Thank you. Okay, so...
This is also our first attempt at doing Outvertising live, so there is a very important survey for you to fill in.
Yes, there is.
As we said, the QR code is back and here to stay, so please use that one and tell us what you think about the day.
And there is another slide, if you don't mind.
Sorry, yeah.
So, you will see a picture of your face on here, and I have some secret notes.
Okay.
Because...
Is this where Eamon Andrews walks in? And I'm the only person who knows what that reference means.
Is that This Is Your Life?
Yes.
Okay, thank God. So no, basically, very quickly, so I want to take a second to celebrate Mark. Mark founded Pride AM and Outvertising, and at the end of this year, I hope you don't mind me doing this, is stepping down as my joint CEO. So we have a new person coming to the helm, with more on that later. But I thought that given that I would have you up here, I could ambush you and say lots of stuff about you, but mainly that you are one of the most brilliant, wise, wonderful colleagues and friends, I'm going to cry, that I've ever had the pleasure of working with. And look at what you've done.
Thank you.
And I think there is, yeah. So this is from all of us.
Oh, thank you.
To say thank you for all of the time, love, and energy that you have put in to advertising over the many years that we've been doing this.
Well, thank you. You want to go to the bar, and I genuinely hadn't prepared anything at all. So I was, but I just want to say that this organisation is so important, and I hope that this afternoon's event has proved that, alongside all of our colleagues who are part of or leading the LGBTQ plus networks in agencies and in brands. We all have our role to play, but yeah, that's what we're here for, and I hope to see you all again. I'll be sitting in the audience when we do this next year, so thank you.
Yeah, so to Mark. Yeah.
Thank you.